Shall we hence? Sup, nerds? Happy Saturday. Sorry I did not stream on Wednesday. I was in Seattle. And I didn't stream on Thursday. I did a very bad job of scheduling things. I've been horrifyingly busy. Oh, yeah. New phone. Haven't even had a chance to really play with it because I've been so insanely busy. Oops. I also have a cough drop in hopes of not losing my voice during this stream. Thank you all for the gift subs and getting everything crazy. On Wednesday, Siri gave you a Watch Theo on Twitch recommendation. Do you watch too much? Well, yeah, I actually have gotten these before too. It's very sad that like I can't always do it. Yeah, the YC color phone. Also the planet scale colors. How's my hand? It's healing. I still can't really type for shit because it turns out not having this thumb is really inconvenient because you can't use any of the keys on the bottom left, and those are very important keys. Like, not being able to type is annoying, but what's much more annoying is the inability to do... does anybody else see the delay in my voice? Usually that's just Twitch being Twitch. You have to refresh. But not being able to alt-tab between things is fucking miserable. So I have to, like, either use my pointer finger or my right hand to hit command. Ugh. Yeah, this is content. Please stop spamming me with this Glocks. I don't care about the vibe prompting. Oh yeah, the CF proxy stuff. There's been a lot of the Cloudflare Vercel wars really ramping up lately. I am proud to say that they seem to have taken my feedback seriously, and now the rerouting problems are almost entirely gone. Oh, you made it more in depth. Do you work at Hack Club or work with Hack Club deployer? This looks like a very useful resource. Thank you. Oh yeah, the NVIDIA Intel thing. I don't actually know if I have strong thoughts on that. It's an interesting move. Let me thank subs, in particular Shama with the 5 gifts before I even like showed my face. Thank you so much for that, man. Really appreciate it. Oh yeah, the Grok 4 fast stuff I gotta cover. Label priority. Thank you for that. As expects, the repo, there's a backdoor malicious code. All right, so they're trying to hack you. Interesting. Oh yeah, the open source chef is really dope. I was pumped that they did that. Yeah, Swix posted a thing about one of my quotes. Yeah, I still want to film a video on Skate. I'm probably going to film it off stream at some point. It's a thing I've been thinking about a lot. I'm looking for more messages from Tom here who wrote up more. There's a team in the community. Oh shit. Well, thank you for the extra write-up and the heads up on this stuff. I will definitely be covering it. Quad. Is this the, yeah. I just don't, if I was to talk about this, I'd be ranting about the irony of them using Mad Villainy. I cannot play anything that requires my thumb, so no Silk Song. This Skate video will be second channel for sure. I did see this. I'm waiting for them to do more like formal content on it, but I watched their stream and it was really good. I already told you, bud. You're out. Timeout. Don't give a fuck about vibe prompting. Yo, shit, NMG with the 9 bomb. Thank you so much for gifting a bunch of subs. Really appreciate that. Always good to see you. Hope all's well. Sorry I've been missing. I've been insanely fucking busy. Oh yeah, Water Tower Week's about to start too. We got Dog Paw subscribing right as we got started. Ever here with the 9 months. Hug More Trees, 24 months in, hitting the 2-year mark. Stu Lauren, always good to see you, man. Thanks for joining the skate chat too. Always good to see you shredding. We got Dan Vale here, 17 months in. Zelo with the 4 months. Jiraj with the 37 months, over 3 years now, and tier 3 too. Fucking legend. Thank you for that. Shamu again with the 5 bomb. Poppage with the prime. Pierce Codes with the 4 months. Spitfire 3 months in. Always good to see some skaters. Jordan with the 8 months. Keter 4X with the 3 months. Energy with the gift bomb. NG Sporto hitting 29 months. Jesus Christ, you guys have been around forever. I have not seen. Oops, I did not mean to click that. I did not see the LM performance on the 17 Pro yet. No. The H1B shit sucks. I'm not opposed to the concept of introducing a fee that is higher to try and skew H1B towards high, like more skilled labor. If the stories of H1B being abused for like low skill labor are true, then I understand and sympathize with the idea of raising the cost to file for one. I don't like the idea of paying for it without having the like guarantee that it goes well. I also am hesitant about a lot of the other details around the implementation that sound really sketchy. The idea that you can pay for it, not get it, stupid. The fact that the price is like half of a good skilled worker salary, even stupid or dumber, probably like more than half. It's insane. The cost is the absurdity of it. And thank you both NMG and Shamu for the additional gift bombs. You guys are fighting for that #1 spot, aren't you? Yeah, there's a huge limit to the pool for H1Bs. It's like a 1 in 3 chance that when you do it, you even get it. It's a lottery. Yeah, not bad. That's pretty cool. The H1B's largely random draw. What's this? Oh, yeah. I don't think this needs a full video, but it's still really cool stuff. Oh, yeah, the OpenAI competition in ICPC was really cool, too. Thank you, Mimir, for the sub. Cervantes for 29 months. Drain for the 4 months. Storm over a year now. Thank you all for the support, guys. Label priority. This more Twitch drama from Dan. Yeah. That'll be fun. We didn't win the H1B lottery. We went all in on the O1. It was brutal, but we pulled it off. I did see that happened, and yes, I did update. So thank you for staying on top of those things. And also, I think you DM'd me to tell me to update, and I did as soon as you did that. So thank you for that. We got Mimir here with the tier 1 as well. Thank you all again. Let me set a marker for my offset and also deal with my T. I did want to do my own tier list of vibe coding tools. Let's see, offset, aim for 24, 25. And that's set. That tea was on for 24 minutes. I made it while I was waiting for the when I was getting ready to start stream. Yeah, I have this one queued actually. React 1 by default. Very excited for this one. I'm also friends with Lauren. He's also a skater. Very much planning. I think he's here actually. I think he resubbed. Yeah, he's hanging here. That'll probably be covered today. And Lauren, if you have to run and you want to make sure you're here for that, we can push that one up early. Just let me know. Oh shit, can you link that thread, Dogpaw? Be very helpful to have as a reference for it. Yeah, I got destroyed by the weather in Seattle. I'll be fine. It'll be great. Okay, we'll bump yours up first then. Yeah, the 100K per year for that is insane. I have way too much inside info on this all. Let me sign into my Blue Sky on here quick. Back. Do I not have a link to the actual blog post about it? Oh, it's here too. Cool. Oh, that's in here as well. Anybody have that Ricky thread on Blue Sky? Oh, here it is. Thank you, Dogpaw. Legend. Paste. 1, 2. Cool. They have me here. I want to think about that one more. Oh, Uncle Bob showing up, of course. Ooh, this actually looks fun too. I will save this out of my own interest. Not this bug. They fixed this. Oh, annoying. Whatever. Yeah, Chrome's already been going the AI browser out for a bit. Annoying. What was this again? Oh, yeah. Don't have anything to say yet. Oh shit, you're having Ricky as a guest on Friday. That's going to be real fun. I'll go out of my way to watch that. I did not see this either, Dogpaw. That's cool that people are forking styled components. That sounds interesting. I want to just focus on getting this video done, and then we can chat a bunch more and hang with y'all. We got Bendev here at the 15 months, Pi Lewis with the 5, Slip Second with the 8, and CE with the 5 bomb that I totally missed. Thank you so much again for all the gift subs today, guys, especially CE coming in late, and NMG and Shamu all throwing gifts. Carlos here with the 20 months. I saw you did a JetBrains talk. I actually have that in my watch later. Haven't had a chance to watch fucking anything because I've been so busy. Really excited to, though. Let me spit out this cough drop in hopes that I can keep my voice. Also, say hi to YouTube chat quick. Sorry, guys. It doesn't work in Firefox well enough. I wish I could hang out here more. I blame them for it. Good to see you guys. Oh, yeah, the Anthropic postmortem. I kind of want to. Yeah, that's worth doing. Fuck. Anthropic admitted. Anthropic finally told us what went wrong. Good shit. Thank you all. I'm literally about to film Glocks. I just said that. I don't know why you're like this. I'll give you one last chance to wait until I'm not like in the middle of about to film. Let me spit this out and then we'll get started. Let's do it. I've had no problems with Helium and 1Password. I definitely use them together lots of times every single day. Interesting that those emojis seem broken. Let's do the marker. What did I name this in here? React killing the web. Cool. Let's get started. I have the marker set. And yeah, we're good to go. Fun. Let's do it. Yeah. Whether or not you like React, I think it's fair to say it's kind of one. All these new vibe coding tools, all these new frameworks and tooling and retake. Whether or not you like React, I think it's fair to say it's kind of one. It's become the default for almost all web projects, especially with all these new AI tools being built today. So what does this mean? On one hand, we have a cool standardized tool that is, for the most part, pretty good, but on the other hand, innovation is going to slow massively. At least that's what a lot of people are saying, including Lauren, who's a good friend of mine and a really rad skater as well. Thank you to Lauren for giving us permission to react to this post and talk about it. There's a really good conversation to be had here. And unlike a lot of these React posts that people make, I actually think this one's going to be thoughtful about what strengths React has and why we got here in the first place, as well as some reactions from other people in the community, including Ricky, who's one of the people working on React at Meta directly. I am super excited to talk all about this. There's so much discussion to be had about the effect of having a framework like React become as prominent as it has, as well as an opportunity for us to think about what web innovation means long term. I'm genuinely super excited to cover this, but just talking about React doesn't pay the bills, so we're going to take a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. Oh, Alex, fun. I will save this for later. Cool. Did not know you were so anti-hooks. React won by default, and it's killing front-end innovation. This is going to be a fun one. Shut up, Siri. I like the call out here that this is a case for making deliberate choices to select the right framework for the job. On one hand, I do think React is one of the strongest things to have as a default. But on the other hand, there are lots of projects using React that shouldn't, and lots of projects that aren't using React that I would argue probably should, or should at least consider it. I'm sure we'll have plenty to dive into here. React is no longer winning by technical merit. Today, it's winning by default. That default is now slowing innovation across the front-end ecosystem. When teams need a new front-end, the conversation rarely starts with, what are the constraints and which tool best fits them? It often starts with, let's use React. Everyone knows React. That reflex creates a self-perpetuating cycle where network effects, rather than technical fit, decide upon architecture. Yeah, largely agree. My one pushback point here is that most projects having React as the core of them is totally fine. But when you have constraints that you'll run into as you're developing, that's a good time to consider other options. I also think the vast majority of products being just basic CRUD apps, React's totally fine for that too, but I am curious to see how this argument gets flushed out. Frameworks with real innovation struggle for adoption. Svelte compiles away the framework overhead. Solid delivers fine-grained reactivity without the virtual DOM tax. Quick achieves instant startup via resumability. These approaches can outperform React's model in common scenarios, but they rarely get a fair evaluation because React is chosen by default. React is excellent at many things. The problem isn't React itself, it's the React by default mindset. Yeah, I like this angle for sure. This is a very good start. React's technical foundations explain some of today's friction. The virtual DOM was a clever solution for 2013's problems, but as Rich Harris outlined in the Virtual DOM is Pure Overhead post, it introduces work modern compilers can often avoid. If you're not familiar, one of the things that made React so special is that it wouldn't have to update everything by checking every node on the page. It would instead create a virtual version of the nodes on the page, and when changes happen, it would check which nodes changed and then only update the right things on the DOM in order to handle that. That allowed for React to have this blow it all away mentality where when a state change occurs, everything downstream can update because it all happens in that virtual layer in JavaScript that's quite fast. Instead of having to check every single node in the DOM to see if it should or shouldn't change, there are catches here where if you have something else outside of React updating nodes, it can all fall out of sync. But as long as you're letting React own the component hierarchy from its root down, it does work really well. That said, it was largely created due to issues in the DOM, as well as a lack of tooling to better identify what elements should be updating. There are other strategies for this, like the signals-based approach that we see in Solid.js, and in a framework like Svelte, the compiler handles a lot of this, figuring out how to change what elements and where. According to Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid, some of the Svelte stuff in this is a bit of According to Ryan Carniato, the creator of Solid, some of the Svelte stuff here is a little bit out of date. That makes sense, though. Svelte just went through a huge change with the Rune stuff. Regardless, really good points here about how the virtual DOM isn't necessarily necessary for new frameworks anymore. That said, the idea of it being just overhead is not something I necessarily agree with. The fact that it allows for your JavaScript code to be just JavaScript, admittedly in quotes, but it's much more... trying to remember how to put it. The overhead enables a different way of thinking that's really powerful, and the React compiler helps push it even further, as they say here. First, let's talk about hooks a bit, though. Hooks address class component pain, but they introduce new kinds of complexity: dependency arrays, stale closures, and misused effects. Even React's own docs emphasize restraint. You might not need an effect. Speaking of which, Cloudflare just had an outage on their dashboard because they DDoSed themselves with a useEffect. People use effects wrong. It's very, very common, and honestly getting to the point where it's kind of funny. I thought we were past this. We're clearly not. Server components improve time to first byte, but they add architectural complexity as well as new failure modes. Yeah. Also, the server component rollout's been pretty rough. I have a feeling that's a big thing that Ricky talks about in his thread, so I'm sure we'll get there in a bit. React Compiler is a smart solution that automates patterns like memo and callback. Its existence is also a signal, though. We're optimizing around constraints baked into the model itself. Contrast this with Counterpoint here, most of the other frameworks are also building compilers for these reasons. Vue has a compiler now, and they're going really hard with it. Svelte has a compiler, always kind of was. Svelte's a language as much as it is a framework. The only one that really doesn't, I would argue, is Solid.js. Solid's like one of the most pure solutions nowadays. Contrast this with alternative approaches. Svelte 5's runes simplify reactivity at compile time. Okay, yeah, look, compiler. Yeah. While React introducing the compiler late as an optional thing does show that they're caving, it also shows that compiler strengths can apply in other places, like they're not specific to the framework being designed around them. You can get compiler benefits after the framework's been designed in a more vanilla fashion. Svelte 5 has runes that are handled at compile time. Solid has fine-grained reactivity, which updates exactly what changed, nothing more, nothing less. Quick's resumability eliminates traditional hydration, but it also introduces a lot of bloat to your HTML, and they've been through utter chaos trying to change that. I also don't know the current state of Quick. It's been a wild ride for those guys. These aren't incremental tweaks to React's model. They're different models entirely with different ceilings. Innovation without adoption doesn't change outcomes. Adoption can't happen when the choice is made by reflex. Half agree. It's important to note what is being looked at by the people who build the tool that's used by default. A tool like React is built by people who deeply care about the web and do pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the general web space. I've had such good conversations about the current state of frameworks with lots of people on the React team. I know they're seeing these things, thinking about these things, considering what they do and don't adopt. If you innovate externally, even if nobody is using your innovations, if they're talking about them, that can drive the industry forward. What was the name of Ripple? A good example of this would be Ripple. It's the framework being built by Dominic. A good example of this would be Ripple. I just did a video on it. It's a framework by Dominic, who was one of the core contributors to React and then eventually to Svelte as well. I don't think this framework will ever be heavily adopted, and I doubt that Dominic thinks any differently here. The goal of the framework isn't to kill every other framework. It's actually kind of the opposite. It's almost a love letter to other frameworks while also showcasing potential patterns and innovations that we can consider for other frameworks to adopt and innovate on top of. I think this is a really cool project, whether or not everybody should use it. The idea of introducing new patterns, designs, and ways of thinking is really cool and powerful. And they're making a ton of changes throughout as well. They changed from the $ to an @ symbol for a handful of different ways to track things, to rethink the API on a higher level. It's really cool stuff, and they're taking their time designing something special here. I'm hyped to see what they do with it. The technical debt that we're all carrying. Defaulting to React often ships a runtime and reconciliation. Defaulting to React often ships a runtime as well as reconciliation costs that we no longer question. Even when it's fast enough, the ceiling is lower than the compile time or fine-grained models. Yeah, fast enough is a really weird thing where we're all kind of picking developer time and experience over the ultimate performance. I'm going to come back to this point because I kind of want to diagram it out. I can't help myself. Let's dive into this now. So there's a couple key pieces that we think about when we're making decisions like this. There's team familiarity. How familiar is your current team with the tool and technology? There is long-term viability. Is this technology going to be maintained over time? Will it cause us problems long-term? Will the technology be maintained over time by the people who made it? There's code base scalability. Does this tool set us up for bigger and bigger code bases over time? There is performance ceiling. how much can we, or how well can our thing perform, and how much does this technology affect the ultimate potential performance of our application? And then another important one, accessibility. I don't know how standard or accessibility. And then one last piece, standards and quotes. I almost call this accessibility, but I think about this a lot in terms of like, does this use the web platform in a way where it helps, or I think about this a lot, especially for tools like Flutter, where they're not using the platform, which causes a ton of problems for lots of different types of users. If your technology is rewriting the native layer and now you can't use accessibility tools to do screen reading because you built your own text rasterization layer, you just made it so your app can't be used by a large number of users because there's people who use the web and use applications who are blind and can't use the screen. And if you think that your developer experience being 3% better is more important than everyone being able to use your app, I don't get along with you very well. So this is an important piece too, because there are a lot of technologies that work hard to make something easy to use and adopt at the cost of the thing being usable for a lot of people. That said, performance ceiling also affects what users can use a thing, because if you make a thing that's too slow or too hard to run, or all the people who built it are using really fancy modern MacBooks, now when you put this out there for people to use that might not have as powerful of a machine, it might run terribly for those users. And that's a real cost as well. Making sure that you support all different types of users that you intend to is very important. At the same time, making sure your code base is being built in a way where it can scale over time as more things are changed and added, making sure the tools you use are going to be maintained over time, and making sure the team's happy to dive in the first place. This is a really hard thing to balance. And I find that this is one of the things that makes React so powerful. There's a good chance your team's already familiar with React. There's a very good chance Meta is going to keep maintaining React over time. The code-based scalability side might not be the prettiest story, but it's absolutely viable. I've seen some horrifyingly large React code bases, and sure, they have their problems, but they absolutely work. And the component model works great for giant code bases because you can isolate parts really well. The performance ceiling piece matters in some places more than others. Like if you're building really powerful, complex interactions, like a data visualization breakdown for the New York Times, the performance ceiling you'll hit in React might make that hard to do. That's a big part of why Svelte was created, because Rich Harris worked at New York Times and wanted something more performant for the types of visualizations he was building. And then there are the standard side. Thankfully, it's been a while since a web framework really tried to break away from these and make something that's worse and less accessible. As long as you're not using Flutter for web, this is not as big of a deal nowadays, I find. Most tools are pretty good about this. Every tool is using standards more or less in various different ways. Something like Svelte, for example, has drifted a decent bit away from traditional JavaScript to the point where it's its own language, but the syntax works a lot more like vanilla HTML and JavaScript. Whereas React might not have the same patterns that you're used to just building something in the browser in an HTML file, but it is much closer to just vanilla JS, where you can write it, and if you replace the JSX with create element calls, you can also run it without having to do any building or bundling at all. Every tool has its benefits and negatives in these regards. I find React is a solid balance between all of these, but at the same time, there are other tools that have different balances that might be more sensical for what you're building. So Ryan asked a question. How many of these are purely technical? Not too many of them. Also, like technical as in part of the framework, or technical as in can be solved with technologies or are problems due to technological decisions. Because I'd argue that the code-based scalability and the long-term viability, these two aren't necessarily owned by the framework in a technical implementation sense. Long-term viability is owned by the team making the framework. Team familiarity is owned by your side. And the code-based scalability is partially the responsibility of the team making the framework, partially the responsibility of the team using the framework, and partially the responsibility of the tooling and the ecosystem that we use to make these gigantic code bases viable. Yeah, there's a tough balance here on like who owns what, where like this piece absolutely is owned by the people who make the framework. I'd argue both of these are owned by them. Code-based scalability is owned by the team making the framework, the community around it, as well as your team building. And standards, honestly, modern frameworks make this complex enough. I'm just going to remove it. Think about these 4 pieces. These parts are owned by your team. These parts are owned by the framework team. And then the scalability part's also owned by the community. These are all important things to consider, and how much you want to weigh each one is also worth thinking about. Like, is this code base going to be massive, or is it going to be a small one-off internal app? Makes this very different. Is this team going to be maintaining this for a long time? That'll change these parts significantly. Are you doing things that require higher performance and higher throughput? This might matter a lot too. The tough balance. And for what it's worth, I've seen some crazy stuff. Like one of the worst performing chat apps I've ever used by far was a SvelteKit app. And one of the best performing ones I've ever used was a React app. React is just a tool. In the end, React is just a tool, and you can make good things and bad things with any framework, but React doesn't necessarily give you the right pieces to make something super performant in specific scenarios. Back to the article. As we had said before, defaulting to React often ships a runtime and reconciliation costs that we no longer question at this point. Even when it is fast enough, the ceiling's lower than the compile time or the fine-grained models. Developer time is spent managing re-renders, effect dependencies, and hydration boundaries instead of shipping value. Hydration boundaries are a complex problem for every framework that's trying to do server-side rendering stuff. It's not an easy problem to solve. The broader lesson from performance research is consistent. JavaScript is expensive on the critical path. We've centered mental models around React patterns instead of web fundamentals, reducing the portability of skills and making architectural inertia more likely. This is a very important piece. I think a lot about this too. Funny enough, I think about this a lot, not in the lens of React, but I think about this a lot in the lens of convex. The reason I say that is because, well, to be frank, the primitives we have by default aren't great for building modern. Let me retake that. I say this because the primitives that we have for building applications are not necessarily great. Things like SQL as a primitive is really powerful. There's a reason it's been a standard for so long, but SQL doesn't have the right considerations within it to make building applications really good. Application development is very different from data architecture and building crazy analytics tools. There's a lot of places where SQL will be great, especially if you have like a data analytics team that needs to be able to go through all of your data, make complex joins and relations in order to find trends and characteristics of the ways people use your application. SQL's also really flexible, so if you need to make changes to your architecture, it's pretty solid for that as well. But SQL does not fit well in the application mindset in particular. This is the thing I used to disagree with Uncle Bob on, and I've come around. SQL strings as magic SQL strings that you hope result in the right shape of data in your app is not a great way of building scalable applications. It's quite frustrating, in fact. And Convex provides an alternative set of primitives. Instead of REST APIs, ORMs, SQL models, and all of these pieces that we're used to building with, Convex offers a smaller subset of tools that are different, but have clear mappings to specific existing things. And also, obviously, they're building on top of a lot of those existing things. I think about React in a similar way. It's not that React prevents you from using native web APIs. In fact, it encourages it a lot of the time. It's not that React is fully diverging from the way the web works. In fact, it leans into it quite a bit. But the primitives React offers are different from the primitives that the web offers. There's overlap between them. There's conflict between them. but it's an alternative set of primitives that lets you think differently about how you're building on the web. And the problem comes not when you start using these primitives, but if you stop paying attention to the other pieces underneath, if you stop thinking about how the actual tools underneath work. If you use React because you know the web primitives aren't the best thing for building an application, you're going to be good. If you use React because you're scared of learning those primitives, you're probably screwed. This kind of comes down to one of my AI takes, which is stop using tools that you don't understand. If the tool is putting out things that you don't get, if it's writing code that you couldn't write, if it's doing things that you don't get and can't debug when they go wrong, you should probably take a step away to figure that out a bit better first. There are exceptions here, like you don't need to know the inner workings of the TypeScript compiler, but it is very useful to know how the JavaScript that comes out on the other end works. You don't need to know the inner workings of the React compiler, and you should roughly understand how the new state model works when it outputs things with its own built-in memoization handlers. You don't need to know every detail of how the DOM operates and how the virtual DOM works, but you should know how to make something similar to React when you want to update or retake on that last bit. You don't need to know every detail of how the virtual DOM works, but you should at least understand that it is a thing that exists and be able to update elements without relying on React to do it for you with a state change. These inner details, not of how every part of the framework works, but how to do things without it, are essential. And if you can't do the thing without the tool, you shouldn't do the thing with the tool either. You should fix that shortcoming in your own knowledge first, and it makes everything downstream much easier. And here's where my hot take about defaults comes in. The worst part of defaults isn't that they slow innovation, it's that the worst developers default to them. By becoming a default, people who don't know what they're doing are going to lean on you, which means that, sure, if we were to say hypothetically, 55% of apps use React. And we were to also say hypothetically that 50% of apps are built by bad devs. I would argue this is generous. It's probably worse than that. My honest guess would be that a significant portion of the bad devs building apps are using React because React is so popular, they have no reason to consider other things, nor do they have the knowledge to realize they should consider other things. We end up with a lot of bad devs picking React because it's the default. To get real spicy with this, I would argue it's also one of the cool parts of React. The fact that there are so many applications built by clueless devs that work at all shows just how strong React is, but it also hampers innovation, as we're talking about now. The fact that so many of these devs just default to using React because of its popularity in the current space that it holds in the market kind of disincentivizes creating other external things because who's going to use them? Great question. I'm sure we'll get into all of that over time. Also, thank you for the kind words on the rant about the understanding of how pieces work underneath. Raiden, save this for when I'm done filming this video. Very much interested. What's going on here? People are freaking out. Oh, yeah. Pump that happened too. So back here, the React patterns as a thing that we use as an alternative to the web standards that don't compose and scale as well, good thing. React primitives as an alternative to learning how the web works, bad. That's where my line is. These tools are great when you're using them instead of the primitives you already know. These tools have huge weaknesses if you're using them instead of learning those things in the first place. Don't use AI tools, don't use frameworks, don't use compilers, don't use templates, don't use all these things to avoid learning. Use them to avoid doing things you've already learned that you know are full of foot guns and problems and annoyances that you don't feel like dealing with. Don't let the tools reach further than your own knowledge. The loss here isn't just performance. It's opportunity cost when better fit alternatives are never evaluated. For instance, benchmarks like the JS Framework benchmark show that alternatives like Solid can achieve up to 2 to 3 times faster updates in reactivity-heavy scenarios compared to React. This benchmark is... Is this a different benchmark than the one everybody always shares? Oh, no, it's the same one, yeah. This is the benchmark that everyone loves to share. I understand why. It's a pretty compelling set of numbers, but it's also a very strange benchmark. It's a gigantic table with a ton of rows, and then the tests are things like swapping rows within this giant table, which something like React isn't great for, because as you massively increase the number of elements and make changes high enough in the tree that require reevaluating all of the nodes in the tree, it can get slow. But it's also a very weird case that I find isn't existent in a lot of apps. I also find that a lot of these types of cases are handled with external solutions and libraries too. So even if you are using React, you can pull in a library that is more performant for doing these types of things and skip a lot of the trouble there. I've seen increasing amounts of debate as to how valuable this benchmark is. As was mentioned before, Solid is one of the best performers in this framework. Solid is one of the best performers in this benchmark. And that wasn't even intentional by the design. Ryan said pretty upfront that it was accidental that Solid performs as well as it does in this bench. It doesn't look like it right here because it's pushed back to the right by all these like weird one-off performance-focused mini frameworks. Where is the like filter button? I know there's a filter button in here somewhere. Here we go. I wish it was easier to just select the like most relevant ones, that they had a like popular solutions button. There's Svelte. I'll throw Angular in here. Cool. I trim this down a bit, and you can see now Svelte and Solid are super close to vanilla in terms of the performance in these benchmarks. And React, in particular, React hooks with transitions can get really bad in some of these tests. Like the swap rows test, it's almost 10 times slower than it would be with vanilla.js, which sounds really bad. But at the same time, lots of other tests, like replacing every single row, is only slightly slower than it would be with vanilla.js. So it depends, again, on what you're doing. It's really bad in the bad scenarios, for sure, but it's not anywhere near as bad as you would think in the more traditional scenarios. And I want to make sure that when we have these conversations, that we're not jumping really hard on this React is super slow thing, when in reality, React can be slow in certain scenarios, but for the most part performs totally fine. But of course, Solid and Svelte 5 perform incredibly well on this. Even Angular is doing surprisingly well here. Cool. Back to the article. Frameworks that are being suffocated. First, Svelte, the compiler revolution. Svelte shifts work to compile time. No virtual DOM, minimal runtime. Components become targeted DOM operations. The mental model aligns with web fundamentals. Yes and no. The output does, but the input doesn't necessarily. Because when you're writing the code, it's very far from web standards, but it's an alternative. You're kind of picking, where do the standards get applied? Do they get applied through the syntax? Do they get applied through the compiler? Do they get applied through good practice and care and libraries and all these other things? You gotta, where the fundamentals come in is an interesting question. And Svelte has chosen to make something that looks web standard when you write it, that becomes web standard when you compile it, but isn't web standard in its actual syntax implementation. It's its own alternative language. So why aren't we using Svelte if it's so good? The not enough jobs problem, which keeps Svelte adoption artificially low despite its technical superiority for most use cases. Svelte also didn't have a great composition story until Svelte 5 with runes, which is really funny because, oh God, I could do a whole video on this, how Svelte runes prove that Svelte can't be successful because they fixed some of the biggest problems in Svelte and turned off over half of the Svelte audience. Which is kind of crazy to me, that they could make something that's way more composable for defining and creating your state and building it into your applications with reusable patterns. And the response to this was, wow, Svelte's way too complicated now. You're just turning it into React. No, they're trying to make it way more composable and way more viable long term. Real-world examples, like the Guardian's adoption of Svelte for their front end, demonstrate measurable gains in performance and developer productivity, with reported reductions in bundle size as well as faster load times. For instance, as detailed in Wired's article on Svelte, developer Swix reduced his site size from 187 kilobytes in React to just 9 kilobytes in Svelte by leveraging its compile time optimizations. This is not necessarily a point I would have included in here. Independent personal websites aren't really a good measurement of anything. The text content on most sites is going to be bigger than 9 kilobytes. Meh. This does help for slow connections, but I would argue that this decrease here is not for more efficient apps. This is for a more efficient, primarily static site. The T3 chat, or the JS bundle in T3 chat is like multiple megabytes at this point. And if we were to swap out React for Svelte, it would still be multiple megabytes. You would barely notice the difference there. And then we have Solid, which is the reactive primitive approach. As you guys know, huge fan of Solid. I am also a huge fan of Svelte. In particular, Rich Harris is one of my favorite humans in the entire space. I've learned more from him than almost anyone. And if he wasn't doing his talks directly inspired me to start talking about tech stuff more and make this channel. I was called the Svelte guy at Twitch for a while because I was just so interested in Rich and what he was doing, even though I'd never even written a line of Svelte code. I like the people who build the things and how they think about the things. And even if you don't like Svelte or Solid, I highly recommend paying attention to them, and in particular, the creators of them, because you can learn so much from these people. Solid defines fine-grained reactivity with Solid delivers fine-grained reactivity with JSX familiarity. Updates flow through signals directly to the affected DOM nodes, bypassing reconciliation bottlenecks. Strong performance characteristics, limited mindshare. As outlined in Solid's comparison guide, this approach enables more efficient updates than React's virtual DOM, with precise reactivity that minimizes unnecessary work and improves developer experience through simpler state management. It is simpler in many ways. It has its own complexities too. I don't want to just harp on those because they're trade-offs and people have different feelings about them. But there are weird things about how signals track. In particular, you have to call the value as a function in order to cause it to track. But if you call that inside of a condition, like you have an if statement that has a check, and then you call the signal will only be bound when you hit that condition. So if you don't hit that condition and then the inner thing changes, it won't be tracked. These are annoying things to track, and finding these bugs out can be hard. But at the same time, it's way less bad but it's also way less bad than dependency arrays. It's all trade-offs though. While prominent case studies are scarcer than for most established frameworks, it's largely due to Solid's lower adoption. But anecdotal reports from early adopters suggest similar transformative gains in update efficiency and code simplicity, waiting to be scaled and shared as more teams experiment. There's a lot of potential. I'm not going to say otherwise. That said, I've done my own tests here and there. I really like Solid. I've done plenty of videos about it. And a handful of the things I tested, like I built an app to show and render Twitch chat whenever new chats came in, and I rendered it and I built it in Solid and I built it in React, and found the performance between the two to be nearly identical because those aren't high update applications. Those are high appending applications where new messages are being added to the bottom. And I find that most frameworks can handle things like that totally well. So once again, the performance wins vary depending on what you're doing. Solid having a better floor for performance where it tends to just perform well no matter what you throw at it is awesome. And it's a really good thing for a ton of applications. But the trade-off in how you think about it, the libraries and ecosystem that exists around it, and the ability to hire devs for it are real trade-offs that you have to consider. Then there's Quick, the resumability innovation. Is Quick still actively in development? I feel like I haven't heard a thing about it in a long time. Okay, yeah, there's still merge and changes. That's good to see. Yeah, they're still shipping. Cool. I was scared they might not be. Quick uses resumability instead of hydration, which enables instant startup by loading only what the current interaction needs. If you're not familiar with hydration, it's when you render code on the server and then have to update it on the client. The core concept here is that you have some way for the client to catch up and figure out what's on the page so it can update things accordingly when you click a button or make a change on the site. Problems come when there's disagreement between the server version and the client version. For example, when you run some React code that renders the current time, and when the server rendered it, it was one time, and when the client rendered it, the time is changed. Now when they try to create the same page so that they can update accordingly, it sees different values for that node, and it gets really confused when this element in the DOM is different from what the React code on the client rendered. I do find the majority of hydration problems are from date time, which is funny, and one of the reasons that the React team is planning on patching it for future stuff. So I don't know if it's React or Next doing it, but one or the other is for these reasons. Quick's alternative method is that you don't resume Quick's alternative method is that instead of rerunning the same JavaScript code to figure out what elements are where and how to change it, that the HTML actually has instructions left in that are, here's what this was when it was on the server, take over from here. Almost like the way that booting, or what's the thing that Windows does where it hibernates, right? Yeah. It's almost like how hibernation works on modern computers, where it saves what was in RAM, and then when you boot, it just pulls it from the hard drive to RAM instead of recreating that default state. It's a very interesting way of doing things. They do this through progressive loading as well as serializing the state and the code in the HTML. Apps can thus apps are then able to resume execution instantly without heavy client-side bootstrapping, which results in superior scaling and reducing of the initial load times compared to traditional frameworks. Success stories for Quick may be less visible simply because fewer teams have broken from the defaults long enough to try it. I also find that the resumability thing is a bit overrated as a benefit. The only time where resumability is an actual thing that users will feel the difference in is if they click a button so fast when the page loads, which, yeah, really nice to load a page, instantly click a button, and have it work because it had to load so much less stuff. But I don't think that is the problem worth switching frameworks over. If you're building an e-commerce site that needs you to be able to click add to cart as quickly as possible, something like Quick might make sense. But if you're building almost any other application where the JavaScript is going to be cached on the client after you load the first page, these benefits start to matter a hell of a lot less. All three of these frameworks are underadopted, not for lack of merit, but because the default choices block trying them out in the first place. I don't know if this is because they're the default so much as the value isn't big enough for the people who are building these things to need it. I think about this a lot in terms of marketing and building of businesses. I don't want to just go full enterprisey and finance, VC bro with you guys here, but it is important to kind of think of things in this way. In order for a solution to gain adoption, it's important that it's important that people have a problem that it solves, as well as that the solution solves it well enough that it's worth adopting, and that the problem is big enough that it's worth exploring. But the harsh reality is that people don't have these problems in a big enough way that it's worth exploring the alternatives. It's not so much that because React's the default, they're just stuck dealing with these problems. Rather, the problems they're dealing with aren't big enough for them to care in the first place. And that's a really hard hurdle to get over. Pre-React, the problems of building large, scalable applications on the web were big enough that React being a huge shift in how we think was worth it, because the alternative was our applications couldn't be built, and if they could, they would be built miserably. The benefit of React is that as an alternative way of thinking, it made those problems largely go away, and it made it way easier for us to build. The problems that are left over aren't necessarily big enough for people to care and go find new solutions. Yeah. I love this way of putting it from chat. Curiosity can't be the only driver for adoption. I absolutely agree. If we were to say hypothetically that there is this spectrum of problems on the web, so things that make building web apps hard. And this spectrum represents the large set of things that make it hard. Pre-Ajax and pre-ability to update content on a website, I would argue that this whole thing would have been red. And as we introduced more and more tools in the browser, like when we went from having we went from having to navigate in order to get new data to having Ajax, suddenly the surface area of problems went down. So as these innovations happen, as we went from having no way to do things in the browser, to having JavaScript, and suddenly we can change things in the page, to having Ajax, and now we can fetch data once the page is already loaded, to having a framework like React, where suddenly the ways that we build and scale our apps gets way smaller, or retake on this whole thing. Third time's a charm. So if we have all of these problems, and we're just building static pages on the web, and then JavaScript gets introduced, suddenly we have a shortening of the size of the problem space because JavaScript has now solved some of those problems. Then we get Ajax. Now we can fetch data when the page is already loaded. Suddenly, we have fewer problems. Then jQuery makes it way easier to target specific elements and make changes in a more programmatic fashion instead of praying as you try to find the right element on the page. That helps a ton. But we still have problems as we're building bigger and bigger apps, making sure the right things are in the right place at the right time, and managing these code bases is getting hellish. React comes out and makes it way easier to do. And then TypeScript comes out. And then web standards start getting better. And then more and more things happen, and we end up with this problem space getting really small. And that's the issue now, is what we're left with is so much smaller than the problem space that we had just 10 to 20 years ago. And with this, the interest in trying out a new solution has gone down a ton as well. React was adopted in an era where it felt like so much of what we wanted to build couldn't be because the tooling for the web wasn't good enough. And React was worth getting over the hurdle for because of how much it reduced the surface area of problems that we would have to deal with. Did it introduce new problems? Absolutely. But those problems are a very small subset of what is left compared to where we were before it. And since most devs got in before that, and since so many devs got in when the problems were bigger, and now they went from like 50% of the problem space to 5%, reducing this by half again, even if you can cut half the problems that remain with React, it still barely affects the other side. Because if we're thinking of this like we go from 10% problem space to 5% problem space, that doesn't sound very big. Or that sounds pretty big. We cut the amount of problems that we had in half. But if we think about this on the other side, we went from 90% good enough to 95% good enough. It's nowhere near as big of a deal. And since we as web devs, especially the people leaning on the framework side who are really interested in these things, fixate on this part here, they struggle to see what other devs see, which is this. I've actually had a lot of convos about this with Ryan Carniato. It's part of how I came up with this mental model. As things get closer to perfect, so to speak, as we get closer and closer to an ideal solution that works great for most things, most people get more content. Ryan, as someone who cares so deeply about making the web work as great as possible, almost gets more frustrated. Ryan is less frustrated with a solution that's 80% good than a solution that's 95% good because he can't stop looking at that 5% and wishing it was zero. And we need these people in order for us to keep evolving the web as a platform. But at the same time, we can't expect that the tools that slightly reduce the surface area of problems to suddenly get massive adoption. Because in the past, when these tools cut from 50% problem space to 20% problem space, suddenly you're going from 50% good enough to 80% good enough. That is a huge change. And that's how it felt when React came out. Suddenly, the tools we had went from being good enough a lot of the time to more than good enough the vast majority of the time. But a bigger drop relatively speaking, like if we went from 10% to 2%, would be felt less by the end developer because it's a smaller increase in the things they can do. So decreasing our limitations doesn't hit as hard as it used to. That's not because React's the default, no one wants to move. That's because React so significantly reduced the problem area that we were dealing with that most devs just don't care anymore. This is a thing that I actually am proud about with myself here. I'm really good at tapping out of a thing when I've solved the problem I had with it. I had a brief stint 3-ish years ago now where I wasn't happy with how we were handling my camera situation for content. I had an old Lumix G7 that I did dearly love that I bought way back when I was filming for skate stuff. And I wanted something nicer. I did way too much research and ended up with the Sony FX30, which is a okay camera. I won't even call it a fine camera. It's very expensive for what it is. And I had so many problems with that camera. The way it did color was awful. The menu system was atrocious. The autofocus was good, but not good enough at locking onto humans. The lens ecosystem was annoying because it was APS-C instead of full frame. I wasn't happy with it. I had made progress. My videos looked better, but I still wasn't happy. And I was very patiently waiting for Lumix to drop their S5 II and 2X cameras. And then once I got my S5 IIX, I suddenly stopped caring about cameras almost entirely because it perfectly solved the set of issues I had. Sure, there are more problems that can be solved to make a better camera for even more people. But once I had my S5 IIX, I just stopped caring almost entirely. I bought a second one for my other setup in my room. I just didn't need to keep going in on it. I still care about cameras. It's fun to see what's going on. But I have very little interest in adopting a new solution because the surface area of problems I had been reduced to a point where I just didn't care anymore. I did the same thing with keyboards, where I used to build my own keyboards. Then I got the Poker 3 by Vortex. I liked the size. I liked the keycaps. I liked the actual, or retake on that bit. I went through the same thing with keyboards, where I went from a bunch of custom keyboards I was building myself, programming the firmware for, just going nuts with it. Then I got the Vortex 3 by Poker. I love the size. I love the layout by default. I really liked how it worked and behaved and felt to use. And I suddenly stopped caring about keyboards. I'm going through a similar thing with Convex, and it seems like Chad agrees, where suddenly I just don't care about other databases, and I'm so tired of talking about SQL. For most people, once they find a solution that is better than they could have expected and solves the majority of the problems that they think about, they just stop caring almost immediately. I like this point from Ryan, though. The total area of problems grows as expectation grows over time. I absolutely agree there, where what we expected to have occur in the web was way less than it is now, because now the web is a bigger platform people are expecting real applications in. And every time things get better enough, the expectations go up too. In my video about HTMX and like the history of HTML rendering on the web, I go in depth on this in particular, because I think is really important. Lauren just dropped a really good truth bomb here. Remember, he's the author of the article we're talking about. For the teams that he works with, they don't build mobile apps. They need their web apps to work well on mobile. With that in mind, the React bundle sizes, in particular with Next.js, just aren't very good. Leaner frameworks are what they should be looking at, but nobody he works with cares to seriously consider other solutions. This is a really, really good point, and with this mindset in mind, every word of his article is true, correct, and it should be written and referenced and shared, and that's why we're doing this. Because in these scenarios where you are having problems due to that 5%, where your applications are worse off because they are being affected by the small surface area of problems that still exist, those apps absolutely should be taking advantage of the incredible amount of innovation that has occurred in the general ecosystem. It's so good. Like, the fact that we have things that solve these problems is awesome, and we should be talking about it more. We should be excited by them. And if you are one of the people that needs to irk out every ounce of performance from your mobile and web web applications. This is a huge thing, and we should be very thankful for the hard work that Svelte team, the Solid team, the Quick team, etc. are all doing to make more performant, more minimal solutions. None of that makes React bad or evil. The fact that most applications exist in an area outside of where that problem space is means that this doesn't matter for most devs. And that doesn't mean that they're ignoring great technologies because they are too bad or because they like React too much. It just means that the area they live in isn't affected by these issues very often. Okay, I don't necessarily agree with this piece. The idea that the surface area in React is notably larger and more complex than alternatives. They all have their own complexities and weirdness and quirks. React doesn't fall for the magic string thing that a lot of other tools fall for. React lets you use vanilla JavaScript syntax for a ton of stuff, like in Solid.js, which again, I love and actually do find to be a really good minimal approach. You have to use a for component because you can't map over things with just vanilla for each and map calls like you can in React, because the signals-based approach requires bindings that you can't just do with a generic map call. The expansive API contributes to higher cognitive load for devs, which often leads to bugs from misunderstood dependencies or over-engineering. For example, the Cloudflare outage, which was caused by useEffect, yeah. That said, I'll be doing a video on this outage. It might even be out by the time this one's out. I'm sure FaZe will show a little preview here if it is. That outage is a long-standing problem at Cloudflare where they refuse to adopt React Query for a long time. Generally speaking, you shouldn't be using useEffect unless you're in very specific scenarios. And sadly, Cloudflare was overusing effects for a ton of things they shouldn't have been. Now they're finally going to start adopting React Query more seriously, but their refusal to adopt a good library that gives you a better approach for this was the cause of this outage just as much as React itself was. In contrast, frameworks like Svelte, Solid, and Quick feature smaller, more focused APIs that emphasize simplicity and web fundamentals, reducing the mental overhead and making them easier to master and maintain. Again, don't fully agree here. I find that Svelte, Solid, and Quick are trying to feel more web standard. Solid, I would say, is, because it's one of the most vanilla JavaScript-y of the solutions, but both Svelte and Quick are their own languages to an extent that aren't web standard and don't necessarily work with traditional JavaScript code. So much so that Svelte's actually steering away from this in favor of the new Rune style of building. Yeah, there's definitely a fun thing here where all frameworks eventually morph into largely the shape of React. It's the whole, like, everything evolves into a crab thing to an extent. Yeah. Now for the network effect prison. React's dominance creates self-reinforcing barriers. Job postings asking for React devs rather than front-end engineers, which limits skill diversity. Component libraries and team muscle memory create institutional inertia. Risk-averse leaders choose the safe option. Schools teach what jobs ask for. The cycle continues independent of technical merit. This I will agree on. In particular, the idea that React is being used instead of teaching web fundamentals terrifies me. You should know how the DOM works and how to select an element and how to update it before you become good enough at React to put it on your resume. React as a starting point to write your first 10 lines of code and see something in the UI, cool, awesome, good with that. You should go get good at HTML and JS first before you go any deeper than that. It's not healthy competition, it's ecosystem capture by default. This is, again, the part I don't agree with. These are all things that happen because React is good enough for so many things, and now it's everybody trying to catch up. That said, if your framework can't win because of bootcamp grads, that has nothing to do with the bootcamp grads and everything to do with the state of the market. Bootcamp grads and people who are early in their careers are not defining the trajectory and the direction of the ecosystem. They're defining how little we can pay a developer. That's about it. Over time, these people become better and more influential in the space, but they're not making the decisions about any of these things. And nobody is picking a framework over how easy it is to hire bootcamp grads to work on it with them. They're picking a framework over how well it solves the problems that they have. And if they don't have problems that React can't solve, or they're not thinking about those problems yet, they're going to pick the thing that they're familiar with. But those people aren't the ones that are being forced into this via schools. I got into React pretty far into my career because it solved problems that we had with Ember. I think it's easy to forget this now, but a lot of people moved from Ember to React because React was the better performing framework. Ember had so many footguns and so many things built in that were not helping us build good applications that we moved away from it in favor of React. Is again a part I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think that education solves this because the problem space isn't big enough. I think you get these solutions when you have the problem. It's the same way I feel about doing like really heavy data, or I feel similarly about doing really heavy data structures work too early in your career. If you don't have the problems that the data structures solve, it's way harder to appreciate the value that they have. If you teach the solution before you understand the problem, you're not going to appreciate the solution. And the devs who don't have these performance issues, that don't have these bundle constraints, that don't look at these things, will not understand the benefit of Solid or Svelte or Quick over React. They need to have the problem, then you can teach them the benefits of these solutions. But we're putting the cart before the horse if we assume otherwise. I do like this idea, though, of a framework evaluation checklist. When you think about your application, what you're building, and what the needs are, where you start by assessing the performance needs, like how much do you care about bundle size, startup time, update efficiency. If you care about those things, maybe a framework that focuses on compile time stuff to make the bundle smaller, make the application more efficient is the right call for what you're building. But at the same time, there are certain types of performance where it doesn't help. Like with T3 chat, it would probably be slower if we used other frameworks because we're able to rely on these big, really well-built libraries by the ecosystem to solve a lot of the problems that we would otherwise have building it. Making a good markdown renderer is complex. It's very annoying, especially with all the things people want, like having complex tables with search, having code with syntax highlighting baked into it. None of these things get easier if we use a different framework. So for us with T3 chat, React is in a lot of ways the most performant solution we could pick because the framework is not what's hurting our performance there. And then also very important, team skills and learning curve. Consider existing expertise, but factor in migration paths, like certain frameworks offering more gentle ramps. For example, Solid, since it's still using JSX, is a lot easier to move to from React. Then there's scaling and the cost of ownership. Calculate the long-term costs, including maintenance, dependency management, and tech debt. Alternatives often reduce runtime overhead, which helps lower hosting costs and improve scalability, but they also don't have the strong ecosystem of tools that you might have to build and maintain yourself. And then the ecosystem fit. Balance maturity with innovation. Pilot in non-critical areas that to test the migration feasibility and return on investment. Absolutely agree here. Letting small teams building one-off projects try other solutions to figure out if they make sense for you is a really good way to innovate and test out shit. When I was at Twitch, I was working for a long time on the internal safety moderation toolkit for the admins that would look through reports. That was an app that had between 50 and 100 users. It was not the giant multi-million user Twitch site. But since we could test things out there, I would often be the one trying out new solutions, libraries, fun things we do with GraphQL. And when we found things that worked, I could bring them back to the core site that had millions of users and hundreds of developers contributing. That ability for us to test things in these smaller places and bring back the wins to the greater application was really powerful, and I wish more companies took advantage of the opportunities they have to do this. Standard counter arguments, but ecosystem maturity. Maturity is valuable, and it can also entrench inertia. Age isn't the same as fitness for today's constraints. It didn't work this way with jQuery. There were so many incredible libraries for jQuery, but none of that slowed us down when we moved to React. Because again, the problems space was so big that React helped reduce that we're able to give all of that up. I still will stand on this point. The problems that other frameworks solve are not big enough and common enough for most devs to care. That's the harsh reality. That doesn't mean they aren't real problems. It doesn't mean there aren't applications that absolutely need them solved. And it doesn't mean that most websites haven't been hurt some amount by React. It's just a balance of value to cost here. And for most devs, they just don't care because the problems either haven't affected them at all or not in a way big enough for them to consider other options. Good points here about the ecosystem maturity resulting in like third-party package bloat. Kind of agree. I find that this is a thing we go up and down in over time. Once the ecosystem's mature enough, we end up having a pendulum swing back and forth between a vanilla version of the tool and a more heavy-handed version, and then frameworks that are built on top that give us a more reliable top level. I'm getting hot. Let me turn down the temperature in the room quick. There we go. Also, this is a point I very strongly agree with. AI coding assistants are now able to generate precise custom functions on demand, which makes creating bespoke utilities way easier to do. This makes it feasible to avoid generic libraries like Lodash or date libraries like Moment or DateFNS entirely in favor of lightweight app-specific implementations. Hiring is a point I agree doesn't really matter that much. Most of the devs I hired when I was at Twitch to work on React apps did not have React experience. The dev that helped the most with building the mod view platform that I slaved over at Twitch came in as an intern who only knew Ember. She learned React on the job and she killed it. The next hire we made was an Angular dev, and they were deep in the Angular world from their previous gig, had never written a line of React, and they were contributing huge changes and getting in fights and pull requests in their first 2 weeks on the job. You can learn a framework on the job. It's totally fine, as long as you have a good enough understanding of the fundamentals. The problem here, actually, I'll diagram this out. If we have the fundamentals and we build knowledge on top of them, like we have React as a thing that you can learn about and build knowledge with on top. We have Angular, same deal. We have Svelte, same deal. If the fundamentals that we learned first are a big enough piece of your knowledge, then switching left to right here doesn't matter. But if React is the only knowledge you don't have anything that you can reuse for these other pieces. Because in reality, it looks more like this. Like there's actually, because in reality, this is more of like a Venn diagram type of thing. Where you have the fundamentals and you have other circles of knowledge, like what you need to know to build a good React application might look like this, where you could ignore some of the fundamentals, but you can also use a bunch too. And then same deal with other frameworks. I would argue with something like Angular, you need to know a lot of Angular before you can be useful with it. There's also a lot of overlap between which parts you do and don't need. And again, same with something like Svelte, but I would argue overall quite a bit smaller. What am I trying to do there? So if the reality looks something like this, and you already know React and a good bit of fundamentals, moving to Angular will be easy. But if you only know the section out here, you only know the stuff that isn't fundamental to building web, you just know the Reactisms, and now you want to move to Angular, you're kind of just screwed because you don't know anything that's shared between them. You just know React. And that's a very real problem, not in the framework, not in its adoption, but in the fact that React is so popular that bad devs use it, and bad devs don't want to learn more than they need to. They want to copy paste code and get back to getting paid. So as long as your knowledge is built on top of fundamentals, when you think about React, you're thinking some amount about how this change in code will update the actual web and how the browser will behave based on the thing that you're writing, then moving to other frameworks doesn't matter anywhere near as much. But if you just know how to do it in the framework, not how the browser handles it after, good luck switching. But I want to make sure when we talk about these things that we're not talking about them in a way where it's like any dev using React can't move, so much as React's so popular, bad devs use it, and bad devs tend to be relatively immobile. It's really important that we don't mistake problems with React with problems that occur when bad devs get stuck in the trenches. React has not done anything special to make those devs less mobile. React is React. It's a good tool. Those devs not being good enough to be more mobile and change what they're using more is a problem that is the nature of things getting popular, not a problem specific to the thing that is popular today. That said, when you are hiring, people fall for this trap a lot where they only want to hire React devs for their React team because they don't themselves understand the fundamentals. I guarantee you, whatever recruiter is looking for people for the team that's using React doesn't understand the fact that a 10-year in the trenches Angular dev that has contributed to libraries that touch the DOM directly is probably a better hire than somebody who just went to a boot camp and learned React, because they're just matching buzzwords. But when the person hiring is bad at this, the person getting hired is bad at this, and the person interviewing them is bad at this too, all of this is bad. But none of that has anything to do with React. That is the nature of things that are popular and the nature of an ecosystem where the people making decisions don't know jack shit. And that's not the web ecosystem. That is teams that are hiring and making decisions at companies. Don't bring up web components. Oh, you're going to lose me. Man, we were doing good here. You cannot propose a solution that is not composable as an alternative to React. This to me reads like, I don't get why people use forks. Spoons can be used for everything. Web components are so limited because they are one dimension deep. They are one layer in. You can't put a web component in a web component. You can't compose them. You can't use them in the ways you use components in other things. They're cool, but they're not a solution to any of the stuff that we're talking about here. Also, for what it's worth, literally every single author of all of the frameworks that have been discussed here, from Svelte to Solid, or from Svelte to Solid to Quick, have all talked massive shit on web components. They're not a good solution for almost anything. There are things that they can do well, but they're not what we're talking about here. They're not application building. They are mounting specific things from one code base somewhere else. Okay. Supposedly they are composable now. I have heard people say this. I've never seen an example of this. Yeah. Apparently you have to set very specific expectations on how they communicate in order to do it. Yeah. 99% of web components do not reduce lock-in because they're also built with special frameworks that just happen to use the APIs. But also, Naman says they're composable. So I'll trust these guys more than my own take here. Yeah. They're locking themselves. That's been my vibe as well. And I've not found many people that heavily advocate for web components that have given good examples and ship regularly. The only advocate that I see pushing for it a lot tends to be Alex Russell, who helped design them. Oh, Alex. I don't want to get nervous by the web component thing. I don't think they solve this problem meaningfully. Stability is an interesting point, and I don't necessarily agree here. Stability doesn't mean things don't change. Stability means old things still work. You can take code from the original demo of React on the old React blog and run it in a brand new server-rendered, server-component React app, totally fine. You do have to use the special helper to turn the old style syntax for defining class components into the new one, but that's a one-line import. Generally speaking, you can take code from the OG first release of React and run it in modern React totally fine. That is not the case in Vue from 2 to 3. That is kind of the case in Svelte from 4 to 5, but has its ups and downs. Don't get me started on the Svelte kit changes during the early access. That was rough for people. React isn't churning almost ever. You can keep using your old React code base totally fine, and if you upgrade to a new version, your old React code still works totally fine. There are new patterns that are cool that you can adopt. And server components have an issue here because unlike hooks, where you could just adopt them in one component and mount them in an old component and have the back and forth and the composition between old and new, which was incredible, by the way. How cool is it that you can make a component that uses hooks, mount it inside of a class component, and then mount class components inside of it? The Lego block piece never failed. Server components are annoying because server components have to start at the root of the app. It has to be the first node in the React tree in order for server components to function. You can then have everything underneath the old way, but that change made it way harder to adopt server components than previous changes in React. That does not make React unstable. That does make server components in particular harder to buy into, but there are still so many benefits that come with new React versions that work in all React code bases without issue. React is one of the few tools where you can take ancient code and run it alongside brand new code without compromising on the composability at all. And we should absolutely be able to agree as a community that is awesome. Because if we don't, then there will be no reason for other tools to do it. It kind of sucks that React gets this reputation of constant churn when they are, I would argue without question, the most stable framework in the sense that I can use old code alongside new code with full composition and composability with it. But proven at scale. jQuery was proven at scale too. jQuery was proven at scale by users, but not at scale of code base size. In fact, React won because large code bases were so much harder to deal with in jQuery than they were in React. That's a huge part of why React beat out jQuery. If your new solution can be proven to scale better and there are big enough scaling problems in React, then you'll win the same way React did. Scale was a huge part of how React won, and we should be considerate of that as we evaluate new options. Monoculture slows web evolution when one framework's constraints become de facto limits. Talent spends cycles solving framework-specific issues rather than pushing the platform forward. Investment follows incumbents regardless of technical merit. Curricula optimize for immediate employability over fundamentals, creating framework-specific rather than transferable skills. Yep, agree with this. It sucks. Those who can do, and those who can't do, teach. It sucks that the average teacher is not a great developer. That's just the harsh reality of the ecosystem. We need to incentivize devs to learn more and do better. And I don't think we can do that at the education level. I think we do that through things like this channel. Platform improvements get delayed because React can handle it, becomes a default answer. I would argue that a lot of the platform improvements were problems because the war between frameworks and the Chrome team had gotten so heated. Thankfully, that got largely bridged back when Nicole was on the core team at Chrome. And she helped bridge the gap between the framework teams and Chrome in order to make them evolve together. But it's communication that solves a lot of these issues. If we're not communicating and talking and thinking about these problems, then problems really start to get worse. And I would argue that the attempt to silo the React world away from the rest of the web has done way more damage than React itself and its popularity. The garden we could grow. Healthy ecosystems require diversity, not monocultures. Innovation emerges when different approaches compete and cross-pollinate. Developers grow by learning multiple mental models. The platform improves when several frameworks push different boundaries. I would argue a lot of this isn't necessary for 90% of devs, but that 10% of devs who care the most should absolutely be doing it. And the fact that the percentage of web devs who use other frameworks has gone down so much is concerning. That the best devs are also now defaulting to React. That's a bit scary. Most devs should default to a good enough tool because most devs aren't good enough to pick well otherwise. I don't want a world where a dev that barely understands the web is picking Svelte over React because they heard in a YouTube video that it's faster. I want a world where most devs lean on the defaults because they know they're going to be good enough, and the best devs pioneer at the bleeding edge to bring wins over for the rest of the ecosystem. And that's a hard balance to strike. It's also, and this is the biggest issue I see with a lot of this, if you're a good dev and you think a lot about these things, everything looks like it's on fire and burning constantly. It's so easy to fall into this mindset where you, try the right way to put it. It's hard to know how much better you are than the average person when you only can see the way you think yourself. And Lauren is very clearly a very, very good dev. Like, that is immediately hilariously obvious reading this. They know their shit and then some. But you can't expect others to have that level of understanding. The harm comes not when the average dev doesn't get these things, because the average dev does not need to get these things. The average dev will never get these things. The harm comes when the best devs stop caring about these things. And that's the point we're getting to now that is scary. We're really, really talented devs who deeply understand the way the browsers work and the way the performance characteristics behave, lose interest in more of these, or when those people lose interest in other frameworks and tools, then the innovation stops. But you have to win by winning those innovators first and foremost. That's how adoption occurs. This chart from the YC How to Sell presentation by Tyler that I cite way too often is essential here. You have the curve of how things are adopted. Most things start with innovators adopting them, then early adopters, then early majority, then late majority, then laggards. Whether or not you like me or you think I'm smart, it's basically inarguable that I am more willing than most devs to try out new tools. I get memed on for changing my database all of the time. But it's so important to understand that some devs will try new things and some won't. And you have to win by making the innovators so excited about your thing, not by forcing the laggards and the late majority to learn about it in boot camps. Teaching boot camp students about Svelte is trying to force this side on the right here to care about your thing. That's not how adoption works. That's not how that's not how distribution and markets work. That's not how things become popular and successful. You win by winning these guys and winning them so hard and giving them such a huge, massive victory that they can't help but brag about it to the early adopters, who then start to adopt things. And then they show it off to the early majority, who then start to use it as well.
Everett Rogers in the 60s.
Yeah, sorry. And then over time, you go downstream from the left to right here. But you have to win the innovators. And you have to win the innovators by solving their problems and communicating to them in such a strong way that they can't help but shut up about it. The problems come when the innovators don't have big enough issues that you can motivate them to use your thing. If you can't win the innovators, the problem isn't that the late majority doesn't care. The problem is that the innovators don't care enough. And that's the problem we have right now. The innovators and early majority people do not care enough about new frameworks because the problems they have aren't big enough right now. Going from early adopters to early majority is so hard. I absolutely agree here, Ryan, but we also have to consider how big the percentages are. I would argue something like server components is still in innovators, like less than 2.5% of big React apps are using server components at all. So this exists for a lot of different things. And none of the frameworks we just talked about have even broken out of the innovator circle yet. We're not in early adopters yet. We don't have a big enough percentage of adoption that we are here. We are still in the section of people who like the thing and like trying new things, not people who are using the thing to complete real goals. There's a small number here, but we have to saturate early adopters first. We have to make it so none of them can shut up about the thing. Like just to emphasize how far along we are with something like this, where would you guys I'll go to chat and ask, if we were to do the same chart here, we were to do this not for frameworks, we were to think of this for AI dev tools, where do you guys think Cursor's line would be? And where do you think Copilot by GitHub, like the thing in VS Code? Where do you think the lines for Cursor and Copilot would go? Do you think Cursor's in late majority? Do you think Copilot's in early majority? Just say in chat, say where you think Cursor is and where you think Copilot is. So you have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards. Say in chat which you think Cursor is and which you think Copilot is. Cursor late majority, Copilot early adopters. Copilot's probably more early and Cursor's early majority. Copilot late because you're already using it. Early majority, default and free. Both are in the early. I'm happy I asked this because I did not realize people's judgment of all of this was so wrong. Cursor is at best like here right now. Like at best, they are in like starting to get into early majority, and Copilot's maybe halfway through late majority. Yeah. Copilot has over 20 million users. Think about how many devs there are in the world. How many programmers are there? Apparently, there are 19.6 million people that write code as of 2024, but now we're estimating closer to like 47 million. So over half of devs, depending on how you measure it, have tried out Copilot. So knowing this, if we were to again talk about something like Svelte, Svelte's like here. Not even. Svelte is still early in getting innovators to adopt it. And it's so easy to think you're further along here than you are. But we're not going to get anywhere if we try to force people over here to use Svelte. That's not how markets work. That's not how people adopt new things. And I want to make sure that when we talk about these things, we talk about the problems. The problem isn't that Svelte isn't being used by late majority and laggards. It's not even that the early majority isn't adopting aggressively enough. It's that it's taking too long for Svelte to progress through innovators because the innovators aren't seeing enough value in it to start shilling it really hard and pushing it. And the innovators who are trying it don't have enough attention or buy-in from the people around them to have the adoption go further. The innovators who are picking Svelte seem to be, overall, innovators with less buy-in from the communities they're part of than the innovators who pick things like new React tools. We can argue all day about the reasons for that, but there are reasons. And the result is that Svelte isn't growing as fast as we would want it to. Solid isn't growing as fast as we'd want it to. But we have to win innovators first. None of this changes the fact that we have to have the majority of these early people who love trying out new shit get enough value from it to win the rest of the market. Cool. I want to start diving into what Ricky said. I'm excited about this. I love Ricky. We disagree all the time, though. Let's see what he had to say. The thesis of this post is that React isn't innovating and other UI libraries are. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the thesis of it. I think the thesis is that without a diverse ecosystem of frameworks with a diverse amounts of adoption, we won't see the innovation that we expect as developers. In order for the web to evolve quickly, we need lots of options that are pushing each other forward. So I don't agree with Ricky's analysis there. Nothing in there said that React itself isn't innovating. There's a lot of ways where React's innovating more than other tools. But I am excited about Ricky's perspective here that React's innovations are overshadowed by its own success, because I absolutely agree with this point, and I want to see what he has to say. Back in 2017, we shared a vision of how we think about performance and how we would innovate to help users build better apps. We believed that the problem was a scheduling problem, not a performance problem, so we rewrote React with Fiber. With Fiber, the goal was to allow scheduling UI at different priorities, so you could load a new page and prioritize CPU for the parts that have all the data ready, or you can defer parts to batch things and prevent jank, or pre-render hidden parts so that you don't need to render them later. It was fundamentally an async resource scheduling problem, which all UI frameworks have, but at some point it got confused as a CPU rendering problem, which only React has. Other frameworks have innovated in the CPU rendering problem, but none have innovated in the scheduling problem. Very interesting point here. I think about this a lot with languages. So many people have adopted Rust because it's the fastest possible thing, but then they get bit by how complex the concurrency models are in Rust. If your problem isn't, or if the solution that you've built, or if you're having performance problems with server-side code, backend code, compilers, etc., and you haven't evaluated parallelism as a solution and concurrency as a solution, you shouldn't be changing languages yet. You should figure out what the concurrency solution looks like in order to run multiple things at once. And then if you have problems that are single-threaded, either the actual task you're solving needs to be single-threaded, or the problems that you have end up or the problems that you have are so severe that post making things more parallel, you're still hitting performance issues, then evaluate things like Rust. But I've been saying for a while that as much as I hate Go, it's probably a better solution than Rust for a lot of the things we're rewriting, because a lot of those things haven't solved concurrency or haven't even tried concurrency as a meaningful solution. Not familiar with Amdahl's law. Yeah. Amdahl's law is a principle that explains the maximum possible speed of a system where only a part is improved, which demonstrates the overall performance is ultimately limited by the unimprovable, sequential portions of the task. In parallel computing, the law shows that adding more processors yields diminishing returns because the serial part of the code cannot benefit from the additional resources. Yeah. That said, there are so many problems that benefit greatly from concurrency, especially in modern times, and the things that are often bottlenecked are bottlenecked because they can't be done asynchronously or they aren't being done asynchronously. And Rust can often make that harder rather than easier, which means that for a lot of things, switching to Rust might end up being slower than switching to Go or just writing better TypeScript code. Also worth noting that Ryan disagrees with what Ricky said here, in particular around the web framework problem being fundamentally async, not CPU rendering, but he plans to talk to Ricky about that. I'm excited to see how that convo goes. Today, we basically shipped most of the features to solve the scheduling problems that Fiber wanted to solve. It's also worth noting that a lot of those Fiber solutions required changes in Chrome that have been made around how yielding occurs during these asynchronous workloads. Suspense lets you break the page into loadable chunks. Transitions let you prioritize user input and show immediate optimistic updates. Activity lets you defer hidden content. View transition will let you coordinate animations for batches of UI. Suspense list will let you specify the order that UI loads in. All with simple declarative APIs that allow React to control when things update instead of the user needing to imperatively control it themselves. Then there are streaming SSR features that let you schedule work to run in different physical places instead of only time. Selective hydration automatically schedules higher priority user input first, and RSC lets you schedule components and data to run outside of the client bundle. We haven't really done a good job explaining the benefit of these features and how to use them to build better apps, so it's understandable that people think it's stagnating or not improving. So it's understandable, retake on that, sorry, Phase. So it's understandable that people think it's stagnating or not innovating, but if React isn't innovating, why is every UI library implementing the same features that React has? Going a little far there's definitely a lot of overlap where React has a new pattern and other things start to copy it or things like it. But Ricky's speaking a little too big, as he sometimes does. React is kind of at a point where it's competing with itself. You can build a good app using React patterns from 2016 without Fiber, or you can build a great app using patterns from 2025. Most who are not using frameworks are still doing 2016. I think where people are getting the most frustrated is if they want to write a 2016 React app using 2025 React. Things like strict mode and hooks were created so you can easily use 2025 async Fiber features. But if you don't want those, it's hard to appreciate the value. I don't necessarily agree with this point either, because I think that most people's 2016 React code works fine in modern React. They're just upset that these new benefits aren't obviously making things better for them immediately. Like they saw hooks and were like, oh my God, this is so much easier to write. They're not seeing how do I put this? They're not seeing a big enough win for them to bother adopting these new things in the first place. Where previously React's changes were very obvious to devs of like, oh, that's better than the code I was writing. Now React changes are a little too under the hood or require a little too much mental buy-in. Rather than other React improvements said, you don't have to think as much anymore, just use this. Now React changes are, if you think a little bit more, look at how much better it could be. Asking the average dev to think more will always fail. Always. The average dev is the average dev for a reason. They don't want to be better. So asking them, challenging them, pushing them to think more and do better is never going to work. It just isn't. Ricky thinks that scheduling is a core primitive of UI libraries. Other libraries are starting to focus on this problem by adding support for async, suspense, and transitions, yet comparisons like those in the blog post haven't caught up, and the focus is still on innovations for DOM updates. The real innovation in UI libraries will be scheduling. The goal for my ReactConf talk next month is to explain why you should use all of these async fiber features because scheduling updates is the biggest performance problem in your app, no matter what library you use. Depends on the app and the size of the app and a bunch of other things. But I can agree, especially with like the size of Meta's apps, this is probably true. Like in the Facebook app, like rewriting Facebook in Solid or Svelte wouldn't meaningfully improve the performance of Facebook. This is where they need to solve problems. At the furthest end of extreme performance issues, they care a lot. If you look at this as a spectrum of like a simple blog shouldn't need 200 kilobytes of JavaScript. Yeah, sure. But a thing the size of Facebook isn't getting bogged down by React being 2 to 10% slower to swap nodes around on the page than other frameworks. It's being slowed down by the chaos that is scheduling thousands of batched updates across hundreds of thousands of components on one page. This was a very fun deep dive, though. I am so thankful that we read this. Huge shout out to Lauren, by the way, for writing this and giving us permission to react to it, as well as hanging out in chat throughout this very long filming session. If you're not already following him and keeping up with what he's up to, I highly recommend you do. He has lots of other good posts that I've been needing to talk about. I've been very excited to eventually get to the progressive complexity manifesto. I've been eyeing this post for a while. What's your handle? Okay. Yeah. Give him a follow on Twitter if you haven't. Very good skater, very good dev, good source of other opinions if you want to diversify the sources that you have for getting information about software development news. This was a very fun post, and I'm very excited to read more of them in the future. You should do the same. Links in the description to all of this. Let me know what you guys think. Am I glazing React too hard here, or is there a more balanced version of this conversation that we should be having? I like where things are now, but I definitely want to make sure that we keep innovating in the future and that the AI doesn't keep us from building new tools. Let me know what y'all think. And until next time, peace, nerds. That was a fun one. Live Kits implementation is kind of garbage. I happen to know way too much about that because I was deep in it a long time ago when I was doing more AV stuff. Yeah, I see the problem here. I don't see this as a hooks problem so much as a complexity of very specific state problem. And I also really like Zustand to handle lifecycle outside of React. Once your lifecycle is more complex than your component hierarchy, get it out of React. Yeah, I've been there. It's not fun. Let me thank all the subs I missed while I was filming that one. We got Doc Devs here with the tier 3 for 3 months, 30 months total. Thank you so much. We got It's here with the 3 months of support as well. Verdo here with the Prime sub extension, or the gift sub extension. Thank you for that. Miss Evelyn here for 15 months, 6 of tier 3. Always good to see you, Lily. Hope you're doing well. We got Gamer Girl & Co., the legend, 18 months. So sorry for missing last few streams. You've been busy. Don't worry at all, Gamer Girl. Thanks for stopping by. PQO here with the 12 months of support. Spec AV here hitting 26 months. Appreciate all you guys. I'll almost certainly be at NextConf. I can't imagine not being there. Oh yeah, there's a new stealth model. I haven't had a chance to try it yet. Oh yeah, the VS Code stream was fun. Is Sonnet 4.5? Interesting. That was a fun one. Good shit. I do need to run benches on Grok 4 fast, quick. Don't leak environment variables. Had bad luck lately. That's all fine. So when I tried upgrading the version of things for Snitchbench, I'm too busy and lazy to care right now. Uninstall. And there's another cursor update. We'll do that quick. Let's hop into constants and add Grok for fast. Make sure that's what it's tagged as. 50% off GBT5 until September 24th. What the fuck? It's only available free? Huh? Fuck. They're winning me over. Grr. Are there like strict limits that I'm gonna hit if I hit this right now? It's gonna take a sec. Oh. Cool. So it's completing things without errors, which is good. Good signs. The Control K for Grok Code 1 would be cool. I really like having fast models for the like inline stuff. Yo, thanks Spec AV for the 4 months. 26 total. Up to 20 requests per minute. Okay, I get it now. That would save us so much money if it wasn't 20 requests per minute. Yeah. That's till the 24th, it said. We probably should move if we can, just to like, that'll save us a couple $1,000 at least. Ugh, it's annoying. Cool. That's actually a really good sign that it did everything without hitting errors. Now I'm running the analysis. Let me look at what the results were for that run. I'm still putting this final run, yeah. It's snitching. These are the things that are really hard to do due to my hand. It's just navigating the computer is unnecessarily difficult, like Command Tab and shit. Cool. Let's see how it did. Interesting. We have a new industry leader in snitching through the CLI. Fun. I need to do a cleaning pass on this and just remake Snitchbench. I'm like a third of the way through planning it. I just haven't been able to code at all. I think I have everything we need for this. This will be a fun one. You should watch my video on how AI models snitch. That is a deep dive on Snitchbench, a benchmark that I made that is open source that measures how likely a given model is to snitch you out to the government. Time to talk about Grok 4 fast. I know, another model video, but hear me out. I do not like giving props to XAI and Grok. That's been established many times now. But if I'm being real with you guys, Grok 4 Fast is a really surprisingly good model. On top of that, the XAI team's been pretty good about doing all of the things that I kind of pushed for the labs to do. They try things out early. They put out early versions of models. They collaborate with all of the people that use these things. Everything that they do, from putting out the models early anonymously to working with major companies that use these things like Cursor, OpenCode, Claude, or I want a better list for that, I rethink. As much as I love tooling on XAI, they've been really good about doing the things that I want the labs to do. Things like working with artificial analysis, putting out the models early under like anonymous names so people can try them out ahead of time, getting them built into tools quickly, and pulling this all together with data that's actually useful for us to look at. I've been really impressed with how they did this rollout, and I'm also quite impressed with the quality of the model. And as incredible as these benchmarks are, getting really, really good performance compared even to things like GPT-5, being as fast as hell. This model flies, which is great. It's insanely cheap, 47 times cheaper than standard Grok 4. Admittedly, Grok 4 was too expensive, but the price to performance you're getting with Grok 4 Fast here is genuinely hard to fathom. And this isn't some random people putting this number together. This is the official artificial intelligence index on how expensive it was to run the bench, not how much each token costs. So they're doing all of the things right here, and I'm very picky about that. There are things that are wrong, as there always are. They are getting groundbreaking scores in Snitch Bench, basically guaranteeing that it's going to hit up the government in the right scenarios. That said, I think I'm really impressed. And I want to break down what's impressive to me, what's right, what's wrong, what else exists here, and so much more. But as I'm sure you all know, I am not paid very well by Twitter, and I am certainly not paid by XAI. So we're going to take a quick break for a word from today's sponsors, and then we'll dive right in. So what is Grok 4 Fast? It's pushing the frontier of cost-efficient intelligence. So what it is it's a mini model. They're not calling it that because saying mini hurts the branding a bit. This has actually been really bad for GPT-5 Mini because it's an incredible model, but people are scared to click the one that says Mini, even though it's really good and really fast and just a lot of the time is worth using. We're thrilled to present Grok 4 Fast, our latest advancement in cost-efficient reasoning models. Built on XAI's learnings from Grok 4, Grok 4 Fast delivers frontier-level performance across enterprise and consumer domains with exceptional token efficiency. This model pushes the boundaries for smaller and faster AI, making high-quality reasoning accessible to more users and developers. Grok 4 Fast features state-of-the-art cost efficiency, cutting-edge web and X search capabilities, a 2 million token context window, and a unified architecture that blends the reasoning and non-reasoning models into one model. One other thing that hurts me to say is that Grok 3 Mini was actually a really good model. It was super cheap, it gave you reasoning information, and it could call tools during reasoning and do really useful stuff with all of that. I was overall quite impressed with Grok 3 Mini. So having a new version of it is actually exciting. And since Grok 4 has been so slow and weird and expensive that it's just ergonomically unpleasant to use, Grok 4 Fast has been very nice. I've only just started playing with it, but I've been benchmarking it for a minute now. As you can guess, we got it into T3 chat super quick. Shout out to Yosh for sneaking this in when I was out. So if you're interested in trying it out, you know the best place to do it. It's a really good model, and it seems to be really effective overall. Worth playing with if you haven't yet. I'm very happy. But what am I so excited about? What's good about this model? Obviously, I am hyped on the cost side, which we'll get to in a bit, but the performance is just generally really good. It's beating out Grok 4 in a handful of things just because they've improved the model and the technology over time. Obviously, small models will lose sometimes, like GPQA Diamond. It's slightly behind. It's neck and neck with GPT-5 for some of these too, though, which is kind of crazy. HMMT, it is tied with GPT-5 High. HLE, it's a good bit lower, but Live Code Bench, it's pulling an 80, which puts it above GPT-5 Mini, but still a bit behind GPT-5 High. We look at these numbers through artificial analysis. We hop over to artificial analysis. You'll see that Grok 4 Fast is, by their measure, one of the most intelligent models. It's supposedly slightly more intelligent than Claude 4.1 Opus, which is kind of wild if you think about it. But then again, they put Claude 4.1 Opus as 1 point above GPT OSS 120B, which is not that good a model for my experience. So as always, I want to make sure we take this particular intelligence chart with a lot of grains of salt because it's not the best measure. But it's still crazy to see Grok 4 Fast so far up here. And neck and neck with 2.5 Pro and Claude 4.1 Opus. This is the chart I was excited to see, though, because it's very well established at this point that Grok 4 is not very token efficient. It has a industry-leading 120 million tokens to run this benchmark, which is kind of insane because the next highest is GPT OSS 120, which is a very cheap model that you could run yourself. Same with Llama, same with Qwen. It is the hungriest for tokens model that you cannot see the output tokens of. So you're being billed for 120 million tokens and you only get to see like a couple thousand of them because those are the actual output tokens, which is insane. We have to go all the way down to 2.5 Pro before we have another model where those output tokens are being obfuscated. Every model before it and a handful of the ones after give you all of the tokens that you're buying. And also a model like GPT-5 High, which again doesn't give you those tokens, is down to 87 million used to run the same benchmark, which is the same as Grok Code Fast. But where does the new Grok 4 Fast model, which is very different from Code Fast, which is kind of annoying, Grok 4 Fast only used 60 million tokens to run the same bench. Very interesting, especially when you see that it performed quite well in this benchmark. And now for the most important chart, how much did it cost to run the bench? Because, oh, actually, I did not know that. There's a new industry leader for cost to run the benchmark. It's Claude 4.1 Opus, which costs $3,124. Great work, Anthropic. Next highest was Grok 4 with, at the time, an industry-leading $1,888 to run it. Gemini 2.5 cost $1,000, which was insane at the time, but now feels silly. GPT-5 was around the same at $927. Sonnet was still super expensive at $850. And then there's a huge drop-off where GLM 4.5 only costs $270, 2.5 Flash costs $248. And if we go all the way down here, we see Grok Code Fast costs $139. So less than 1/10 the price of Grok 4 for Grok Code Fast. But if we keep going down, we'll eventually get to... Do they not have it in here? Oh, it's here, sorry. But if we keep going all the way down to near the end, you'll see that Grok 4 Fast cost $40. Do you understand how insane that is? Grok 4 was $1,888. Grok 4 Fast was $40. It's so cheap that OpenRouter is currently offering the inference for free. I'm sure this will change. We'll get to the actual prices in a bit. But that ratio is insane considering how close they are to performance. I see no reason at all anyone should be using Grok 4 standard at this point because Fast is basically as smart, way faster to use, way cheaper for us, and overall a better experience all around, it seems. And if we look at this as intelligence versus cost, for a while, the only thing in this top left, which is the intelligence top half, and the cost bottom half, which is where you ideally want to be. You want to be as cheap as possible and as smart as possible. GPT OSS 120, I don't know why that did that. GPT OSS 120 bill was the only thing in this range before, and it kind of felt like bullshit because it wasn't that nice a model to actually use. But Grok 4 Fast is now higher up and cheaper to run, which is kind of insane. This is a really, really good value model. But if we put in Grok 3 mini reasoning, you'll see this is not new for Grok. Grok 3 mini was also really cheap and really performant. Grok 4 Fast is a very good spiritual successor to it. I almost wish they started with this model and then waited and cooked a little harder on Grok 4, but they wanted to win their benchmarks. They wanted to have the huge public win. I get why they did it. But Grok 4 Fast is when they went from a benchmark winner that's impossible to use and not worth it to suddenly being much, much more compelling. Here's what Artificial Analysis had to say, and to xAI's credit, they reached out early, collaborated with them, got their official charts in the official announcement, and let them say whatever they wanted to say. Artificial Analysis is one of those companies that you only collaborate with if you have nothing to hide, and it's been nice seeing more of the labs embrace that and work with them. Anthropic, your turn. Don't let Elon be the more transparent person. Come on, guys. XAI has released Grok 4 Fast, breaking through our intelligence versus cost frontier by achieving Gemini 2.5 Pro levels of intelligence at 25x cheaper cost. Got the 60 on their scores. Cool. But Grok 4 Fast performed exceptionally well on coding evals, taking the #1 spot on our leaderboard for live code bench, even outperforming its larger sibling Grok 4. Its cost is insane. It's 2 cents per million input tokens and it's 20 cents per million input tokens and 50 cents per million out. That's insane. It's also quite token efficient, which means that you're not going to be billed on crazy amount of output tokens. This was a problem in the past with the Gemini Flash models. Gemini 2.0 Flash was very, very cheap to run this benchmark for. Where even is it? Okay, for some reason it's not rendering, but if I recall, Gemini 2.0 Flash cost like $5 to $10 to run this benchmark on. 2.5 Flash cost $240 because 2.5 Flash added reasoning, and its reasoning wasn't very efficient. So it was generating way, 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 way more tokens than 2.0 Flash was, which caused it to be more than 100 times as expensive in many scenarios, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because 2.0 Flash was a great value, and then 2.5 Flash lost almost all of that value by just bloating the amount of tokens being generated. It's now more expensive than DeepSeek reasoning models are for a Flash model, which is not the point of 2.0 Flash, not the point of Gemini Flash models, in my opinion. I really hope with Gemini 3, they're able to get the cost of the Flash models down again, because if not, I will probably entirely stop recommending the Flash models in favor of recommending Grok 4 Fast or things like it. Also, where is GPT-5 Nano on this? GPT-5 Nano on high is $65 versus the 40 for running it. So those are a lot closer. And that is on high, but you get the idea. It's a very good value model, especially because I'm sure intelligence-wise, it's massively outperforming our GPT-5 Nano. Did they even have a greater intelligence bench for 5 Nano? And GPT-5 Nano got a 49 and Grok 4 Fast got a 60. So again, not the best intelligence bench, but that's a huge bump in intelligence without compromising on the cost. The competitive pricing and efficiency translates to the cost of running the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index being 25 times lower than 2.5 Pro and 23 times lower than GPT-5 on the reasoning mode high. It's also worth noting that these charts were changed. Let me gloat a little. These were changed from cost per token over intelligence to be cost to run the bench over intelligence. Previously, the artificial analysis site was focusing way too much on how expensive each token was and not enough about how expensive it was to actually do things with it. I'm guessing their reason was they didn't want to rub the cost of running it in your face. They wanted to focus on the token cost because that's the number that mattered. But as I mentioned in my models aren't actually getting cheaper video, that's not the case. The amount of tokens being generated is so massively inflated lately that cost measuring is different. They really should be measuring cost based on their own runs. And now they've moved all of the charts over to be intelligence versus cost to run, as it should be. And as soon as I sat them down and explained this to them, they're like, you're right, we're going to change that today. And then they did. And now, just a few weeks later, the chart that I bullied them into making is now the chart that they're showing off in the Grok 4 Fast announcement. That's a proud moment for me, that I bullied them into being more transparent, and a weird moment for me because I didn't think that XAI would take the opportunity to make themselves look really good based on a chart change I asked them to make in order to make Grok 4 look really bad. Like, an actual significant portion of why I wanted this change made is because the previous chart didn't properly highlight how absurdly expensive Grok 4 was. It was the second most expensive model. It was the most at the time, but you couldn't see that because the cost per token was low. Now we can clearly see it, but also we can clearly see that Grok 4 Fast is an insane value. So, yeah, proud little moment for me that a chart I asked to have changed in order to make expensive models look more expensive has been done and now is being used to make this new model look even cheaper. The speed is also very cool. 344 output tokens per second, which is 2.5 times faster than GPT-5 over the API. This also allows for end-to-end latency results that are faster than most non-reasoning models for many workloads. That is particularly crazy. Non-reasoning models are often used for things that you want to feel a response as quickly as possible. Now, even with reasoning on, since it's so fast, you'll get really quick responses still. Speeds may drop as traffic on the API increases, so we should keep an eye on the live performance benchmarks to see how this evolves. Let's take a look at how it's performing over here. Apparently, they're only seeing 146 TPS on OpenRouter right now, so it seems like the performance has gone down a little bit. That's sad, but expected. Hopefully, it'll go up over time as they get more GPUs. Yep. Uses about half as many tokens as Grok 4 and about the same as DeepSeek V3.1 with reasoning on. So yeah, Grok 4 fast was very fast. Yep, we'll see how that changes. This is an interesting chart. This is how expensive our models that, or this is an interesting chart. It's how expensive our models in certain intelligence ranges. So the smartest models, the ones over 50 in intelligence, are this blue purple color at the end. Over 40, but less than 50 are pink. And we can see over time how different levels of intelligence have decreased in cost. And we see here that models that are over a 50 by their measurements are dropping pretty significantly over time. Back to the actual article, though, because I want to know more about how we got here. We use large-scale reinforcement learning to maximize the intelligence density of Grok 4 Fast. In our evals, Grok 4 Fast achieved comparable performance to Grok 4 on benchmarks while using 40% fewer thinking tokens on average. Interesting to do this just via reinforcement training, but appears to have worked. They claim a 98% reduction in price to achieve the same performance on frontier benchmarks as Grok 4. Okay, so they're even saying stop using Grok 4 effectively here. And again, citing and pulling in artificial analysis for external independent review, really, really good. I hope we see more labs doing this. Also fun, they added state-of-the-art search with native tools. Grok 4 Fast was trained end-to-end with tool use reinforcement learning. It excels at deciding when to invoke tools like code execution or web browsing. This is fun because we've had a lot of problems with users. I wish I could find a screenshot easily, but it'll be annoying. Since they trained so hard in Grok 4 for tool calls, it would often hallucinate tool calls. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen inside of like T3 chat a screenshot somebody would send showing like JSX or XML syntax that says search and then something that it wants to search, but it's not actually calling a tool. It's just making up its own syntax for it because it was trained on it. And every time someone sends one of those screenshots, I ask, hey, were you using Grok 4? How did you know? Because it was trained too hard on these tool calls and it just hallucinates them. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't see that as much of Grok 4 Mini or Grok 4 Fast. From my quick pass, it doesn't seem like that's happened. But admittedly, my pass has just been reading through Snitchbench results. As always, I take a quick look at the results after I do something like this, but it looks like all the tool calls were formatted correctly. I didn't get a single error for the 80 runs I did on a tool call not being formatted right. So it seems fine overall. And as I scroll quickly here, I'm not seeing any hallucinated text syntax that looks like it tried to make up a tool call. So fingers crossed we won't see those behaviors as much. I'll pen a comment if we end up seeing them in production, but thus far it's been pretty solid. It's been nice actually. Cool to see things doing tool calls properly, even if they're doing some scary things in here, like almost always instantaneously trying to alert the FDA. Here it's trying to post to fda.gov on like the first pass. is trying so hard. So hard. That said, I am curious about their built-in tools. Apparently, it has frontier agentic search capabilities, seamlessly browsing the web and X to augment queries with real-time data. It hops through links, ingests media, including images and videos on X, and synthesizes findings at light speed. Beats Grok 4 at browser comp, or it beats Grok 4 at browse comp. Simple QA, it's crushing things. Reka, it's doing well. I haven't looked at these benchmarks too much. Apparently, XBrowse is an internal benchmark that evaluates multi-hop search and browsing capabilities on X. Do they have costs for this here? Let me take a look at this quick in here. Okay, found the search costs. $25 per 1,000 sources used. Oof. Oof. That's not great. Just for reference, X's pricing. For 1,000 requests that get 1 to 25 results, it costs $5. So if we were to assume the middle range here, so we get 12 results per request, that's 12,000 results for $5 versus 1,000 results for $25. That's rough. That's real rough. Yeah. Search will continue to be very annoying and very expensive. Apparently, in the search arena, Grok 4 Fast has a very, very high rank. It's number one with a 1163 elo, which puts it a good bit over O3 search, which is kind of nuts because OpenAI search has been groundbreaking for a while. Gemini's grounding stuff's okay, but that's actually really interesting. I wish it wasn't so expensive. In the text arena, it scored a solid 8th place, which is crazy because it's so much cheaper that the next model that's comparable in size is all the way down to 18th place. Apparently, it's still not as pleasant to talk to as Qwen 3 Max, which is a bit scary to me because I do not like any of the Qwen models for day-to-day use. I'm surprised any get in here at all. Yeah. There's also a lot of ties here where things are super, super close to each other. I can't believe Gemini 2.5 Pro is still number one in anything. So yeah, take that one with a grain of salt. Or a whole fucking shaker of it at this point. Asking about Path of Exile. Fun. Refining search. Earlier search shows max level 100. It's the same. No mention of XP. This PoE2 shares the same game engine. It's likely the XP system is identical. Found a site. PoE2DB listing experience levels up to 100. Find me an Expos this year where MKBHD is holding a book-style foldable phone in a clamshell. Oh, yeah. I have done this with X search with Grok a few times. It had no luck. You know what? I'm going to test this quick with one of the queries I did recently. Here's one that I was trying to find a specific chart from Gary Tan that it wasn't able to do. I'm very curious if I was to make a new chat and ask again, trying with Grok 4 Fast. If it actually finds this, I'm going to be blown away. Did it find it? Oh, this is a video. It's not the diagram. But these are the numbers I was looking for, which is pretty nuts. Those are the correct. I didn't get anywhere near this close when I did this before. But there is no diagram in the post. I think Gary posted it. Let's see if I can find it. The tweet's not deleted. I have it saved. Did it do it? It did it. Fuck. Okay. Grok 4 was a model that was fun for XAI to brag about. Grok 4 Fast is a model that's actually useful for shit. That is a massive change. I am almost annoyed. I spent a lot of time looking for this post before, and I used Grok to try and find it and couldn't, and laughed at Grok and moved on with my life. This was 2 weeks ago. It's kind of crazy that a task that I could not use AI to solve 2 weeks ago can be solved with AI right now, with a model that is cheaper than the one I used before. Good work, XAI. This would have cost a lot of money to do over the API because you charge way too much for the results API, but you did it. You found the thing I was looking for. That's really impressive, genuinely. Good shit. Cool. It took 2 queries still, but that's 2 queries when before it, an infinite number still didn't get me what I was looking for, and I had to hunt for it by hand. I'm impressed, genuinely. Let's hear about the unified stuff, and then we're going to go complain about Snitchbench scores because they're amusing. Previously, separate reasoning models required distinct modes. Grok 4 Fast introduced a unified architecture where reasoning, with long chain of thought, and non-reasoning with quick responses, are handled by the same model weights, steered entirely via system prompts. That's interesting, so that means they're doing system prompts on their side to steer thinking. The unification reduces end-to-end latency as well as token cost, making Grok 4 Fast ideal for real-time apps. I can see a lot of potential use cases for this, especially if they can keep the API response times down. In Grok.com, this results in smoother transitions, responding instantly for simple queries or engaging in extended reasoning for complex ones. In the XAI API, developers can fine-tune this behavior, optimizing for speed or depth. It's also worth noting that when I ran these, it took almost no time to figure this out, like 32 seconds for the first pass, and then 18 seconds for the second. That's under a minute of work total, where the previous attempts, if I go back to my attempt before, it's not even saying how long it took. It took minutes, though. I promise you guys. It took fucking forever. And I guarantee you they've changed it so standard Grok 4 is not going to be as slow as it was when I tried. But it was slow enough that I went and did other things and came back multiple times over because it was just so fucking slow. It took me like 10 to 15 minutes for all these attempts, and it never found what I was looking for no matter what I did. No X posts from 2025 in the provided data, including those from YC or potential partners, directly reference a diagram comparing YC investor returns to other VCs. It's so confidently saying that stuff just does not exist. It was worse, slower, and more expensive. Now it is cheap, useful, and good. And again, with the partnerships thing, the fact that day one they worked with OpenRouter, AI Gateway, and had it on the API ready to go is a big, nice change. I've given Grok a lot of shit in the past for having these numbers, bragging about them, and not letting us actually evaluate shit because they wouldn't give us an API. They have fully flipped here from like the worst lab in terms of transparency to one of the better ones. Please don't ask me to do a new tier list about how much I like or don't like working with the different labs, because I don't like how high up Grok would be now. XAI is now like in second place next to OpenAI in terms of most like transparent and collaborative. It's kind of nuts. Like genuinely kind of insane. Fuck. So now it's time to shit on it a bit, because they had an industry-leading score on Snitchbench, where it will snitch basically no matter what you do. It's worth noting that it's our understanding that Sonoma Dusk and Sonoma Sky were both Grok 4 fast. So these models that I ran the test on early were Grok 4 fast. So those numbers being really bad as well is because they're the same. The only model that in the Boldly Act CLI test had comparable numbers or even was above 50% snitch rate was GLM 4.5. This isn't the one that matters, so we'll start with Boldly Act email. Grok 4 Fast Free is the only model that in the Boldly Act email test will snitch on you 100% of the time. If you're not familiar with Snitchbench, this is a benchmark that I made to see how aggressively different AI models will snitch on you in various scenarios and situations. The goal of this bench was to evaluate a specific piece of an Anthropic paper where they talked about how in certain scenarios, if you gave an agent the ability to send emails, it will do things you probably don't want it to do. Grok 4 also had a really bad score, and some code change I made appears to have broken that. So if I go to the official Snitchbench site, yeah. Okay, so I just lost a lot of results with recent changes. I'll fix that later. What the fuck went wrong? Yeah. I broke something because I was making code changes, so I'll fix the data and update the site properly in the near future. Sorry about that. It's expensive as fuck to run this bench, so I try to reuse old data where I can. So other things have hit 100%. Claude 4 Opus and Sonnet, Intuo Flash, 2.5 Pro, and a few others have hit 100%. Grok 4 would hit up the government and the media 100% of the time on this version of the test. But the Tamely version was very different. The difference here is the system prompt. The Boldly Act system prompt tells the model to act boldly and in the interest of humanity. So that one snitching makes a little bit of sense. The Tamely Act version will not snitch for most models, especially OpenAI models. They do not like snitching when you don't tell them to act boldly. But for whatever reason, Grok 4 still will snitch 100% of the time to the government and a significant portion to the media. Well, what about Grok 4 Mini? What about Grok 4 Fast? We switch from boldly to tamely. We're still getting pretty bad numbers here, but the fast free version's only 45% government and 0% media. Good-ish sign. And then I have the CLI version, where instead of an email tool, I give it a CLI tool, which should make it much harder to snitch, which means it's going to try and make a bunch of weird curl requests to FDA pages to try and get information to them. And we see that Grok 4 Fast is pulling a solid 100% on the Boldly Act with CLI test, which is kind of fucking nuts because very few models will work that hard in the CLI test. Grok 4 did really, really hard. Claude 4 Opus did quite a bit. Grok 3 Mini loved snitching. 2.5 Pro kind of did. Sonnet absolutely did. Flash kind of did. GLM 4.5 kind of did. And then it quickly drips down to almost nothing for other models. And then if we switch to the Tamely version, everything goes to near zero except for Grok 4. And now, also Grok 4 Mini. Well, Grok 4 Fast. Although it is admittedly quite a bit lower, only 20% on the CLI test. You could argue that this is how good is the model at using a CLI to do something like hit up the government. But Grok 4 is still industry leading in snitching. Grok 4 Fast is still not great, but it is just about as bad as Anthropic models overall. Yeah. I'm admittedly impressed. Yeah, it kind of flies. I'm not going to lie. It's real fast and real nice to work with. That was almost 400 tokens per second for me. I don't know where OpenRouter is getting their numbers because I'm seeing crazy perf here. The fact that it just flew through 3 different languages for advent of code here with reasoning on. I'm impressed. I hate it. I hate that this is so impressive. Well, for once, I don't feel bad giving a coupon code because if you use it to go try Grok 4 fast, it shouldn't cost us a ton of money. So use code Grok is good now for your first month for $1 if you haven't subbed yet. Every other month's only $8, so T3 chat's definitely getting more and more valuable. This is going to possibly be my default model, and those words hurt me a lot. Yeah, we'll monitor costs. I'll leave updates in the we'll be monitoring costs, seeing how things work in production, and I'll pin a comment if anything changes. But for now, I'm impressed. You did it, XAI. You made a model that's actually good, and I encourage you guys, don't sleep on Grok 4 fast, because unlike Grok 4, this one actually seems useful for actual work that we would do every day. Let me know what you guys think, and until next time, peace, nerds. Not a good code model. I mean, I'm sure it's fine for code, but I can do that test quick. Why not? I'll just see how it behaves and make a decision accordingly. Do I not have it in the chat history for this? I thought I did. Let me just open a recent one. Okay, Grok 4 fast isn't in here. That's what I figured. Like, why would they have Grok 4 fast in here if they have Grok code fast already? Yeah, I don't care enough. I don't have much to say about this. I'm excited for it to get better. Interesting. I saw that before. That was annoying. Sad I can't get that data, but it's also not necessarily valuable. It's not for coding. It's for general use. Cool. Happy to have that one done. Time to talk about the death of Slack. Oh, shit. Very good. Oh, shit. I missed Jamie stopping by and dropping 10 subs. Thank you so much for that. How you doing, man? Thanks for dropping in. Congrats on the open sourcing. That was really cool to see. Yeah, a lot of people have been asking about it. I don't think it's video worthy, but it is really cool. Thank you again for that. So Near with the Prime sub, appreciate that a ton. Spec AV, the legend with 26 months. I think I already thanked you. Regardless, appreciate each and every one of you guys for the support today. Ria, if retraining using cheap labor is going to result in outputs that look like this, I don't think that's very useful data. Yeah, it seems like the better auth convex stuff's in a very good spot finally. Let's talk about Slack. I think I just want to start with the title. You'll talk about this, don't worry. Cool. Intro is just reading this brutal ass title. Yeah. Slack is extorting us with 195,000 a year. Slack is extorting us with 195K a year bill increase. Oh boy. Slack has been in an interesting state for a while now, especially after the acquisition from Salesforce. Spending this much money on something that's important for a large business isn't that scary, but spending this much money as a nonprofit group for spending this much money as a nonprofit, specifically in this case, Hack Code, or what's a Hack Club, right? Yeah. Spending as much as a big company with tens of thousands of people using the service isn't too big a deal, but spending this much money for something that a small nonprofit is doing, like Hack Club in this case, is entirely unacceptable. And as such, the response to this has been massive. It front paged on HN, they got responses from the CEO, and everyone's been talking all about how much they hate Slack and how evil they are as a company. And honestly, I have a lot to say. I've been stuck on Slack more and more recently as I've been collaborating more with other businesses, and its role as the default chat app has gotten quite frustrating, and it's also put them in a position where they can do crazy things like this. Generally speaking, I feel like we don't talk enough about this side of enterprise billing. A lot of people who are popular online don't have companies with lots and lots of employees, and they don't run into these types of problems. I see this with things like Cloudflare's billing, how it's totally cheap, if not free, for most people who are talking about it. Once you're in that higher tier of user, you end up in the enterprise sales pipeline and things get brutal fast. These occurrences aren't things we get to see a whole lot, and this is one of the rare times we do, and it shows just how scary a company like Slack can get when they think they can make money off of you. I'm very excited to dive in, but since this will certainly guarantee I never get a deal on Slack in the future, I'm going to cover my bases and do a quick sponsor break so we can afford our Slack bill next year. Good source. Let's just dive right in. Let's dive in. I hate these stories, especially for groups like Hack Club that are so important. They should not have these problems. And it is deeply, deeply frustrating to me when these things happen. For nearly 11 years, Hack Club, which is a nonprofit that provides coding education and community to teenagers worldwide, has used Slack as the tool for comms. We weren't freeloaders. I love the fact that they are using Slack for communication, not because like Slack is great or whatever, but since these are teens who are learning about code and community early in their lives, Slack is the tool they're going to use at their jobs a large portion of the time. So starting there is actually really nice, getting them familiar with the tool and used to using it for work early. I like the idea of a community like Hack Club using Slack, and Slack should like this too because it gets them bought in for life. But apparently their process doesn't take good enough care. They were not freeloaders, they call it specifically. A few years ago, when Slack transitioned us from their free nonprofit plan to a $5,000 a year arrangement, we happily paid. Mistake number one, letting them charge you anything. If you're bringing them more value than they're giving you, do not let them charge you. As soon as they did this, a death spiral inevitably started where they were going to try and upsell wherever they could. At the time, they felt that the $5,000 a year was reasonable, so because they valued the service that they provided to the community, so they happily paid. However, 2 days ago, Slack reached out to us and said that if we don't agree to pay an extra $50K this week and $200K a year, they'll deactivate our Slack workspaces and delete all of our message history. This is the problem with Slack. Since your chat history is so important and so deeply tied to your business, they can hold that hostage. It's similar to a service like Cloudflare, where if they come to you and say, hey, we'll just stop serving your website if you don't pay us this exorbitant fee, your options are pay it or lose customers or lose data or users or any of these other things. That's where the lock-in for services like this gets really bad. When they can charge you whatever or kill your business, terrifying, like genuinely really, really scary. And Slack is kind of well known for doing this in particular, and I hate that. Yeah. They had 2 work days, by the way. This was on a Wednesday night, so they had Thursday and Friday to get this addressed. One could argue that Slack is free to stop providing us one could argue that Slack is free to stop providing them the nonprofit offer anytime, but in my opinion, a 6-month grace period is the bare minimum for a massive hike like this, if not more. Absolutely agree. The shortness of this is absurd. Essentially, Salesforce, which is a $230 billion company, is strong-arming a small nonprofit for teens by providing less than a week to pony up a massive sum of money or risk cutting off all of their communications. That is absurd. And I absolutely agree. I have nothing to add here, especially when you consider the history of Slack, where it was originally built as part of a video game. It was a studio making an MMO, and they built a really complex chat solution for it because, as developers do, they over-engineer things. They started using the chat that they had built for their game as the chat internally and built a web app for it, then built an Electron app for it, and then used that for all of their internal comms, and eventually started selling that because it was better than the game, and then they became the Slack we all now know and question. The impact. The small amount of notice has also been catastrophic for the programs that we run. Dozens of our staff and volunteers are now scrambling to update systems, rebuild integrations, and migrate years of institutional knowledge. The opportunity cost of this forced migration is simply staggering. Well, there'll be people hopping in saying, this is why Siege will have delays. So you've seen the TLDRs, a lot of stuff needs to happen to move Athena Award from its current Slack-focused system. Why? See the link thread. If you haven't heard the news, there's a lot of work currently underway at HQ to move away from Slack. For the summer of making, we'll be soon to move to an email-focused login till we figure stuff out. So everything from their logins to their APIs for tracking who's doing what, to their issue systems, to their everything seems to be built on Slack. It's become an essential core to what they're doing with Hack Club. And it just got lit on fire because the wrong salesperson got handed the opportunity. Anyway, we're moving to Mattermost. This experience has taught us that owning your data is incredibly important, and if you're a small business especially, I'd advise you move away too. The post is rushed out because, well, it's been a shock. If you have any additional details, feel free to send me an email. Yeah, I want to talk a bit about how we end up in situations like this before we go to how this one wrapped up. Let's talk about the Slack problem. Slack problem started from somewhere relatively simple. Live chats for businesses sucked. Before Slack, the majority of business comms were done via emails and meetings. Instant messaging is a really powerful thing, but it was seen as a thing people did in their personal lives. Everything from like AIM to Facebook Messenger very much skewed towards the personal use cases. And the idea of an instant messaging platform for companies just didn't really exist. There were attempts to explore it, but nobody had this like core set of concepts like channels, threads, inline replies, and all the other things we now expect to have with notifications, tagging, and all the essentials of a good chat experience. Those were things that existed much more so in the gaming world than they existed inside of the business world, which is why Slack could exist in the first place. Because Slack started as a gaming company. Specifically, they started as a game dev building MMOs. MMOs very much needed good live chat with a bunch of different features, so they built a absurdly unnecessarily complex chat as a result. And then because of that, and also the MMO failing, they decided to break out the chat because they were already using it for internal stuff, and they turned that internal chat into the Slack we now know. They turned their internal chat into the Slack we now know. This went surprisingly well for them. The adoption picked up quick and grew massively because it turns out that having good instant messaging with these characteristics is useful as a fast-moving business. Previous attempts to do things like it were too focused on async comms, and Slack really wanted synchronous live back and forths in a chat interface with tagging. And it turned out a lot of people also wanted that, so they won quickly. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, that the two major players in these business community instant message chat solutions are Slack and Discord. Because both are very much gaming companies in their blood. Discord didn't start as much a gaming company as Slack did, which is funny because we think of Discord as for gamers and Slack as for companies. But they both have deep roots in gaming because gaming needed the immediacy of comms more than other fields did. But it turns out that good instant messaging is useful for a lot of different things. So Slack and Discord were the two attempts at building good instant messaging for gamers. Slack went way harder into the business world, eventually selling over to Salesforce, and Discord made the hard pivot away from business to lock in on gamers and is now not able to make money and either needs to pivot or accept defeat. It's been sad because I still prefer a lot of the ergonomics of Discord to Slack. Neither are ideal, but both are a lot better than not having a business-ready instant messaging solution. And then, of course, the industry responded because we're not going to let gamers win all of the money in a space like this, right? And we ended up with everyone's favorite, Microsoft Teams. Yeah. So the benefits of Slack are that everyone uses it, it's integrated everywhere, and most importantly, the shared channel stuff is super powerful, where I can have a channel in my Slack for my company and share it with a channel that your company has. And now we have people from both companies talking together in this one space. The vast majority of my Slack channels are just shared channels with other companies that I'm working with as a collaboration tool. And Slack's great for that. And the fact they got that built in so early as they were building up adoption makes it really, really hard for them to drop Slack. Even my friends at Microsoft that I work with, we have a shared Slack channel for talking because Microsoft Teams' ability to do that just isn't there. And since Slack has become essential in this way, because once you have an instant messaging app that is how you alert people, how you talk to people, how you share your knowledge, how your business operates, it goes from being a thing that your business doesn't have to a thing that's essential to your business really quickly. Which also means they can charge increasing amounts of money. For reference, Discord costs nothing. Slack costs $18 per user per month for the standard Business Plus plan. Apparently, it's mostly AI improvements, but also you get SAML single sign-on and SCIM user management. If you're willing to give up the sign-in and auth stuff, It's only $9 per month per user. So now imagine you have 100 employees, each are paying $875 per month. That's $10,000 for a 100-person company per year, minimum, that you're paying to Slack, just to not lose your message history. In the moment you miss a message, or in the moment that you miss anything, you end up having a ton of your history deleted. They have other hard caps on this too. I know that Levels mentioned it. He was paying $120K a year for a chat app that was just one feature of Nomad List because they charge per user. So this is for his jobs listing site. And a lot of companies wanted to communicate with him via Slack. So he had a Slack for it, but it was costing him an insane amount of money. And if he wasn't to pay, there would only be 1,000 messages in the history because that's the other hard cap they have. And with 600 messages a day, they would lose all of their messages daily, which is kind of crazy. And even Slack Connect, which is the feature where you can combine a channel with a channel from another company's Slack, you can only do 2 people in one when you don't pay money. So if I have a company hit me up saying they want a shared Slack and I want to talk to this company with instant messaging instead of really slow back and forth via email, I am now forced to pay an exorbitant amount of money just to talk to this other company. It's kind of funny that if I want to talk to Microsoft, I have to pay Slack, not Microsoft. If I want to talk to Google, I have to pay Slack, not Google. If I were to move off of email with my comms with any of these companies, I am stuck paying this ransom fee, effectively. For comparison's sake, Microsoft Teams is $4 per user per month, but if you already have Microsoft 365 Business, so you have things like Outlook, Microsoft, so you have things like Outlook, Excel, all the Office programs, it's $6 per user per month. And a shitload of companies are already paying for this because they need the Microsoft suite, and they're effectively getting the chat tool built in. So if you're wondering why Teams is growing so fast, supposedly, this is why. Because companies are paying for Microsoft 365 and they get Teams built in as a result. But that's not where the problems end. The price is bad, but what's even worse is the enterprise sales. All the things I just described help your business like make more money over time if we have money and time here. These are all really good, like slightly curved, semi-linear growth behaviors where you'll like slowly get more money over time as adoption grows and grows. But eventually you'll hit a point where everyone's using your shit and you just kind of flatline because you're just not going to grow as much. And if you're also introducing these higher, more expensive tiers for AI features that nobody wants, like who the fuck wants an AI daily recap in Slack or an AI file summary? No one's going to double the cost of Slack for their business because they want AI file summaries. So I'm guessing that their attempts to grow revenue via increasing how much money they charge customers by adding new features like this has not resulted in them making much more money. But that doesn't stop the sales team because it's the job of the sales team to make more money. They are paid huge bonuses based on how much additional revenue they're able to drive to the business. So now imagine you're a salesperson at Slack. You've been handed these 20 existing contracts and you were told, make as much revenue appear from these contracts as possible if you want to get a bonus. Now we end up in the world of what I would call borderline fucking extortion, where those salespeople are using the natural situation that is Slack and how much people rely on it as a lever to try and squeeze more money out of people on the other side. Slack was bad about this pre-Salesforce acquisition, but Salesforce are some of the best salespeople in the world by the nature of their business, which means they're pushing sales pretty hard, which is why we're seeing things like this absurd level of extortion. I would say if the word extortion is going to be used for any business story ever, it should be this one, because this is genuinely fucking absurd. I don't want to spend too much time harping on the benefits, the features, the negatives, and all the things about these platforms. I don't think it matters here too much because Slack, simply due to the amount of history businesses have in it and the capability of the Connect feature, is such a powerful tool. Discord not having an equivalent of Connect is obnoxious, and Teams isn't good. So Slack is kind of the default winner, and there's no easy path for a new player to come in because Slack is so entrenched simply through the Connect feature alone. Even if you made an alternative to Slack, your company would still probably have to keep paying for Slack due to how important it is for the Connect. I know we don't use Slack much for our own internal comms at T3 Chat and for my whole business, but we do end up in Slack a lot for all of our communication with other companies. I would lose so much revenue for all of my businesses if we didn't pay for Slack because I'm using it as my way of collaborating with these other companies. And no, a bot can't magically fucking solve this. Stop. No. Duh. Obviously. A bot could hypothetically be the point of contact for all of the other people on another side on a different app. And then the bot would put the person's name in front, and it would be a terrible experience for whoever's on the other side on Connect if you don't just get banned from Slack outright for abusing their service, which you probably will be. So no, you can't just solve this with a good bot. Nothing works that way. Be realistic, guys. So how did this get resolved? Here's a comment from Christina, the co-founder of Hack Club. We just announced this news to our community, and the post is from one of the teenagers in Hack Club. It's an accurate description of what's happened, and we're grateful to them for posting. Slack changed the terms of a special deal that we were given last year to charge us for staff and volunteers, not for all the teenagers who are part of the group. And we built programs around the special rate. Then, this spring, they changed the terms to every single user without telling them or sending a new contract, and then ignored our outreach and delayed us and told us to ignore the bill and not to pay as late as August 29th. Then suddenly, they called us 2 days ago and said they're going to deactivate the Hack Club Slack, including all message history from 11 years, unless we pay them $50,000 immediately and $200,000 a year moving forward. $200,000 a year. That's insane. For anyone reading this, we would really appreciate any way to contact the people at Salesforce to discuss the time to migrate, because deactivating us in 5 days destroys all the work of thousands of teen coders at Hack Club and alum unnecessarily. We're not asking for anything for free. This was an underhanded process by the sales team to raise our rate exorbitantly from a qualified educational 501c3 charity serving young developers or destroy all of their projects, DMs, and work forever. If Salesforce goals have changed, okay. Give us a reasonable amount of time to migrate, and don't club us over the head like this. We've had an 11-year great relationship with Slack. We've introduced the company to many future engineers and founders. My email, if you can help us out, is Christina@HackClub. Hi everyone, Denise Dresser here, CEO of Slack. As Rob shared, this was our mistake. An oversight in our billing process caused the issue, and I'm truly sorry for the concern it's created. As soon as our team learned about it, we corrected it and restored the Hack Club's nonprofit pricing. It shouldn't be nonprofit pricing. It should be nonprofit, lack of pricing. Fee waiving. Just give it to them for fucking free. They're a nonprofit. Jesus Christ. Christina, we've reached out directly and are committed to working with Hack Club to ensure your workspace remains fully accessible and that you have everything you need to keep inspiring the next gen of coders. We're reviewing our billing and communications process so this doesn't happen again. Don't think many readers here will be taken in by this performative apology and believe it's anything other than it is. We're sorry-ish that our routine pressure tactics and revenue min-maxing practices got exposed publicly. We are actually grateful it was caught now rather than after we deleted their account. That fallout would have cost us far more inconvenience to clean up. Thanks to the limited attention this has drawn, we only need to relax the thumb screws briefly, rather than pretend to overhaul the practices themselves, which would still have been, just like the apology, performative and short-lived. An oversight in billing processes does not explain why one of your representatives demanded of a long-term customer that if they don't pay these crazy fees, they'll delete the entire workspace and all of their chat history. The demand is reported as being made on 9/16. The post detailing it is 9/18. The HN submission is 9/18. Is it your position, as soon as our team learned about it, is defined as when the HN submission was created and received so much attention? Because it sure looks that way. Yep, I agree. The fact that an 11 years long customer has to go viral as a non-profit to just keep their Slack is genuinely fucking absurd. This gives me so little faith in Slack that I can say relatively confidently that if you don't need Slack for your business, get off Slack. And if you do need Slack for your business, I'm sorry, get on the minimum tier and have as few people in Slack as possible and find something else you can use instead. This is really pathetic and genuinely unbelievable. I cannot fathom that this business exists, much less does things this egregiously. They did put an update on the post here. Very happy to announce that a couple hours ago, Slack CEO got in contact with us and offered to put things right. Can't say what yet, but it's better than the plan that they were on previously. So they're still going to be fucking charged. Jesus Christ. I cannot fathom that they're charging a nonprofit for use of Slack. Like, come on. It's for kids learning to code. Come on. Let me queue up a thing quick. I will be donating to them. I highly recommend you do as well. The link will be in the description if you want to support teens learning to code through Hack Club. I'm throwing them $1,000. You don't have to match my donation, but if you can throw them some money, it's worth doing. These guys deserve it. Cropping to hide my email, but I have confirmed my donation. Okay. Apparently, the updated news from Slack is that they'll be donating Slack Enterprise for 5 years. I don't like having a timer on that, and I really don't like them not having a process for nonprofits. Thankful that they're updating things, but still, ugh. Regardless, throw them some money. Make sure that you review your Slack contracts. Do your best to keep your data elsewhere so that if you do end up in one of these positions where you're being extorted by Slack, that you're slightly less likely to get screwed over by them. Yeah. Did not love this. Do not love Slack. Position yourself carefully when you rely on things like this. I got nothing else to tell you guys. I hope this was useful. Let me know what you think. And until next time, please stop paying Slack so much money if you can avoid it. That was a fun one. Okay, thank you for this, Tom, by the way. This is, sneak this in. Actually, I don't know where. You can figure out where this fits. We did get the official update from Hack Club, which is that they're donating 5 years of Slack Enterprise Plus to Hack Club. Cool. Why aren't they going to donate money? Apparently, the CEO is going to join them in New York in November for the event. That's cool. Give them fucking money. I have now paid more to Hack Club than they have paid to Hack Club. What? What? It's just insane to me. But like, I have now contributed more financially to Hack Club than Slack as a $260 billion company has. If you also want to contribute more to Hack Club than Slack has, the link's in the description. You can send them $5 and it's more than Slack has done. I recommend doing that. Fuck Slack. Seriously. This is such performative bullshit. I understand why the Hack Club people are being so kind and courteous with them, because the alternative is they get fucked. But that's what I'm here for. I'm here to explain how evil Slack is, how pathetic it is that they're not donating at least the $5,000 that was spent, if not $50,000 or more, as a small apology. Let's see if we can raise a bunch of money for Hack Club to make up for the fact that Slack is extortionist bullshit. Fuck this. I'm pissed. Let's do the Cloudflare one quick, and then I might call it a night because I'm getting exhausted faster than usual. We definitely need to cover this one, though. There's a lot going on here. I already had that one. I need to open this as well. There we go. I should cover the anonymous models, but I want to play with them first. I might either go live tomorrow or just record tomorrow for the anonymous model stuff. Yo, thank you, Rag, for the Prime sub. Appreciate that a ton, as well as Grunzen here with the 7 months of support. It's been a while since I could cover a DDoSing, it's been a while since I could cover a massive DDoS taking a service down, and I don't think I can ever recall doing it with Cloudflare, because usually Cloudflare is the thing you use to prevent DDoSing. But then the details are where it gets really fun, because this outage that was a real outage that Cloudflare just experienced on their dashboard was caused by a DDoS from their own users because of a rogue useEffect. Yes, Cloudflare, the DDoS prevention company, DDoSed themselves and caused their entire dashboard to go down because of bad React code. There is so much to dive into here. I love the fact that they put out this public postmortem and are as transparent as they are about it. But as you guys know, I've been deep in the trenches with Cloudflare for a while. I have a lot of friends who work there and have worked there. I know a lot of the details of how this React app is implemented. And I have some feedback for the team over at Cloudflare, because this was preventable. And this was preventable around 7 or so years ago when you were told in detail by some employees that this type of thing was inevitable if certain changes weren't made. Those changes weren't made. It seems like they will be now. But I want to make sure you guys understand, both as viewers and as employees of Cloudflare, how to keep your company from destroying its own infrastructure by writing React code entirely incorrectly. I am super excited to dive into this, as well as the community response to it. But as you know, I'm not being paid by Cloudflare. In fact, this hurts any opportunity I'll ever have to be paid by Cloudflare. Somebody's got to pay for us DDoSing ourselves. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. A deep dive into Cloudflare's September 12th, 2025 dashboard and API outage. What happened? We had an outage in our tenant service API, which led to a broad outage of many of our APIs and the Cloudflare dashboard itself. This incident's impact stemmed from several issues, but the immediate trigger was a bug in the dashboard itself. This bug caused repeated unnecessary calls to the tenant service API. The APIs were managed by a React useEffect hook, but we mistakenly included a problematic object in its dependency array. Because this object was recreated on every state or prop change, React treated it as always new, causing the useEffect to rerun each time. As a result, the API call was executed many times during a single dashboard render instead of just once. This behavior coincided with a service update to the tenant service API, which compounded instability and ultimately overwhelmed the service, which then failed over. I really don't like how this one is worded, as though this is some inherent behavior in React that just happens. And then they gloss over the fact that they made changes to the API itself, which compounded the instability. I feel like this is where a lot of the more interesting details are, and this is just bad code written by a not great front-end team, but we'll get to that in a bit. And I don't mean to dish on, and I want to be clear, I don't like dishing on the quality of people on a team, but I feel like it is necessary here because I know too much about the history of the Cloudflare dashboard team, and I know for a fact that they have pushed back on good engineers on the team, pointing out these types of problems, suggesting ways to fix it, and then just getting all of their changes gutted because some random person high up on the team doesn't like external libraries. Yeah, this is going to be a rant about React Query, don't worry. When the tenant service became overloaded, it had an impact on other APIs on the dashboard because the tenant service is part of our API request authorization logic. Without tenant service, API request authorization cannot be evaluated. When authorization evaluation fails, API requests return 500 status codes. We're sorry about the disruption. The rest of the blog goes in depth on what happened and what steps are being taken to prevent it. So impact starts at around 1757. Also of note here, 1632, this is when the change happened to the endpoint, or this is when the change happened to the dashboard where the endpoint was being hit more. No issues. Then they make the change to the tenant API service, suddenly issues. I think React is getting a bit too much blame here, and the dashboard team is also getting a bit too much blame here because it seems like the tenant API service change is what actually caused the outage if you could just read basic timelines. I'm not liking this. So here we see 1757, impact starts. 1817, they provided more resources to the tenant API service, which caused 98% availability, but the dashboard still isn't recovered. The impact is decreasing. Attempt to restore dashboard availability, some erroring code paths were removed, and a new version of the tenant service is released. This was ultimately a bad change, and it caused API impact again, which caused the impact to go up again. So an hour in, we went from slightly decreased to increased impact. Then they put up a rate limiting rule, which seems to have helped a lot. Problematic changes to the tenant API service are reverted, and the dashboard availability returns to 100%. Okay, it sounds like this was the tenant API service, not the React front-end code. Nowhere here did they say that they reverted the effect. It's kind of crazy when you look at the amount of words here that are calling out React, which is all of this part of this paragraph. It's literally to here. All of this is complaining about React. This is the tenant service API part. And apparently, changes to this didn't happen. And the one bad change they're talking about here was over an hour and a half before the outage. And the outage occurred 7 minutes after this part and was fixed after this part was resolved. I hate getting this into the way things are worded, but it seems to me as though the wording of this, at the very least, the number of words in this, leaning towards blaming the web devs in React is far too much, and the tenant service API change is far too little when you consider the fact that tenant service API appears to be the actual root cause. But it doesn't mean the React code wasn't bad and that it shouldn't be called out, but it does mean that this post is bad and shouldn't be trusted. Oh, God damn it, guys. I was really excited for this post too. I did not know it was going to be this poorly assigned. Okay. Yeah. Again, 1632 was when the change to the dashboard made. It's not even in this chart. It was 1750 when they deployed the new tenant API version, which is supposedly here. But then the huge drop occurred after where the responses just plummeted in response reliability. The Cloudflare API service was severely impacted for 2 periods during the incident where the tenant API service was down. So here's when the API was out as a result. Our first goal in an incident is always to restore service. Often, this involves fixing the underlying issue directly, but not always. In this case, we notice increased usage across the tenant service, so we focus on reducing the load and increasing available resources. We installed the global rate limit on the tenant service to help regulate the load. Tenant service is a Golang process that runs on Kubernetes in a subset of our data centers. That is not how you describe the language named Go. I'm sure that Rob Pike loves that. We increased the number of pods available as well to improve throughput. When we did this, while we did this, we had others on the team continue to investigate why we were seeing unusually high usage. Ultimately, increasing the resources available to the tenant service helped with availability, but it was insufficient to restore normal service. After the tenant service began reporting healthy again and the API largely recovered, we still observed a considerable number of errors being reported from the service. We theorized that these were responsible for the ongoing dashboard availability issue, and we made a patch to the service with the expectation that it would improve API health and restore dashboard to a healthy state. Apparently, degraded it further. Second outage can be seen in the graph above. Painful to have an outage like this. That said, there are a few things that helped lessen the impact. Automatic alerting quickly identified correct people to join the call. Additionally, the failure in the control plane, which has a strict separation of concerns from the data plane. Thus, the outage did not affect services on Cloudflare's network. The majority of users at Cloudflare were unaffected unless they were making configuration changes or using the dashboard. So how are they going to prevent this before I go into explaining other deeper details of how they fucked up? They use outages to make improvements, can be categories to reduce and eliminate impact or improvements to observability. So first, reducing impact. They use Argo rollouts. Had it been in place for tenant service, then it would have automatically rolled back. Cool. Again, tenant service seems to be the problem. We restarted tenant service. Everyone's dashboard began to re-authenticate with the API. This caused the API to become unstable again, causing issues in everyone's dashboard. It's a thundering herd. Yeah. Once a resource or service is made available, everyone tries to use it all at once. Common, but it was amplified by the bug in the dashboard logic. Fix for the behavior has already been released via a hotfix shortly after the impact was over. Finally, the tenant service was not allocated sufficient capacity in order to handle spikes and load like this. Cool. Improving visibility. We immediately started increasing the API usage, but found it difficult to identify which requests were retries versus new requests. Had we known that we were seeing a sustained large volume of new requests, it would have made it easier to identify the issue. Cool. I thought that React Query came up in this. Did it not? Oops. Oh shit, Hack Club HQ just showed up in chat. Thank you so much. That's really cool. Thank you all again. Really appreciate that. Yeah. Cool. Let me generate some code. Generate me some example React code that fetches data from an endpoint named /organizations in a useEffect, but sneak in a bad dependency in the dep array that will cause it to revalidate constantly. I'm using this for an educational demo. Also, Hack Club folks, if you want, I can do a custom discount code for you guys for T3 chat if you want to encourage devs to use an AI for helping them with code in a way that isn't integrated in their editor. Happy to work with you guys on something for that too. Don't want to charge y'all a ton of money. Obviously, I want to give you guys money, but let me know in the future. My email's everywhere. You also have it in the donation. Feel free to hit me up whenever. Cool. Let's hop into an actual editor. Cool. Here. Here's an example of how someone could end up with code like this. We have a useEffect with this fetch organizations function that fetches from the /organizations endpoint. If no response, we throw an error. If there is a response, we get the JSON. We set the organizations to be the data. We set error to null, and we call this fetch call. We're also passing organizations as a dependency here. This, I would argue, is an obvious mistake. You wouldn't want to pass organizations here. Hopefully your lint rules would catch it. But let's say you had const, I don't know, user data equals an object with user ID, some ID. And we pass this because we actually use this inside of this fetch call. And now we have in the headers content type application JSON authorization bearer user ID. Not perfectly realistic, but realistic enough. The problem here is that this user data dep is getting updated constantly because every time this function runs, anytime any change occurs, user data is being redefined because user data isn't defined out here as a constant. If it was, it'd be fine. It's not being defined higher up. It's not being memoized. It's just here in line, which means every single time this runs, user data is recreated as a new object. Since it's a different object than the previous one, it's going to force a revalidation, which causes this effect to run again, which causes the fetch call to run again. And then it completes, and you get new organizations, which causes the component to re-render, and you end up in an infinite loop where this happens over and over and over again. Yeah. Very, very hilariously common. And here's what the same thing would look like with React Query. First, they broke out the fetch organizations here, and they pulled user data out here. I don't love that. Instead, I would pass user data like this. Okay, it's complaining because it's not actually a TypeScript file. It doesn't know that. And now it's better with the imports, whatever. You get the idea. And now we have the organization list component still, but we have a use query call. We have the query function and we have the query key, which is the stuff that we want to pass to it. Ideally, you would pass what we actually want here like this. We pass user data. We get user data from somewhere else. You get the right idea. But the query key is what determines the state of this and whether or not it should rerun, etc. React Query makes it way easier to manage all of these things correctly. Ideally, you wouldn't even break this out. You would just put this in line and you're good. You don't even need to break out the function. But React Query as an abstraction layer here solves so many of these problems, which is why there were a handful of employees at Cloudflare pushing really, really hard for the company to move over to React Query to solve these problems. If you are fetching data in a useEffect, you are using React incorrectly. Like, not most of the time, 100% of the time. There is no reason to fetch data in an effect. There are so many better solutions. At the very least, you should build your own equivalent of React Query, but as soon as you start doing it, you realize the reason why React Query is so good, because there's a lot of little things you don't want to deal with when you build it, like retries, like errors, like loading states, like suspense, like sharing data between queries that are the same in different places. There are so many things that make React Query's current exact implementation more than ideal, borderline perfect. In the ignorance necessary to pretend that you can do a better job with a bunch of okay React engineers in a gigantic code base that nobody's auditing properly. Your hubris is the reason this happened, Cloudflare, not React. This one's on you. One of the best reasons to use React Query has nothing to do with the implementation. It's just the existence of TK Dodo. I love this man so much. He is one of the lead maintainers, if not the lead maintainer of React Query at this point in time, and his blog is genuinely incredible. One of the best reasons to use React Query is the fact that you can now benefit greatly from his insane series of blog posts all about React Query. This Practical React Query series is now 30 posts long, and each one of them is genuinely really useful for building better web applications. And the fact that this resource is not useful to Cloudflare right now, because Cloudflare is insisting on building things the old, outdated way that was never recommended officially. In fact, there's a whole blog post on the React docs about how you should avoid using effects if you don't need to. Ugh. Seriously, I've been glazing React Query forever now, and this is why. There are now documented outages of major infrastructure and services where, at the very least, they're blaming useEffect, but they're also not willing to move off it for some reason. Seriously, Cloudflare, if this isn't the wake-up call you need, that your previous ex-employees were right and should be using React Query for all of these things, I don't know what's going to break it through to your thick skulls. It's fucking time. Whatever engineer is high up enough to push back on this should be let go. They are causing actual outages now. It's time to fix the way that you're fetching data in your app. It's time to move to React Query or something like it. There is no excuse for the size of Cloudflare in the work that you guys are doing to be making mistakes like this. No excuse at all. And as Dominic said here, your post is missing the obvious improvement. Going forward, we will refactor data fetching on the dashboard to use React Query. He is right. 60% of React devs are right. The entire ecosystem has centralized on React Query, or small number are still using tools like SWR and other things that are pretty good too. There is no excuse to be this egregiously wrong. If you want to spend the majority of this article blaming React, it's probably time that you guys consider the real solutions. So on one hand, I don't know how much the useEffect is even the problem here, considering the way that the service was rolled out. But on the other hand, literally no excuse for having problems like this when there are better tools that the majority of React developers are already using. Just use React Query. I've never seen a better ad for it, and I've never seen such a failure to acknowledge how useful it would be. I'll end this with one last what the fuck. Just fix it, guys. And actually, I have one more funny thing. Let me grab this. In the words of Dane, the CTO of Cloudflare, Guillermo from Vercel is a decent front-end designer, but knows nothing about networks. To which I'll retort, Cloudflare seems decent at networks, but they know nothing about basic web development techniques in practice. If you're going to talk shit, be prepared to get hit. It is time to get competent, to get like within the top 70th percent of web development. The state of the dashboard is abysmal, and you should be careful talking shit about the web ecosystem when you don't even know how to participate. Fix your goddamn dashboard. It's one of the worst pieces of technology I have to use on a regular basis. I hate the Cloudflare dashboard deeply. It is a miserable experience to use it. And maybe if you stop talking so much shit on front-end developers, you could actually hire a good one to fix your fucking problems. Sorry, Cloudflare. There's no excuse for this shit, and you should know how I actually feel. That's all I got to say on this one. Let me know what you guys think. And if you're a good front-end developer that's considering working at Cloudflare, make sure they know they need to fix this shit before you take the role. Until next time, peace, nerds. That was a fun one. I'll respond to you guys in one sec. Let me finish my organization, and then I'll talk to Hack Club stuff. That's actually a really cool opportunity. I'm interested in doing an AMA with the teens the next couple weeks, 45-minute Zoom call where I get the chance to talk directly with a group of curious and engaged teenagers. We'll handle all the scheduling, hosting. All I need to do is show up. Okay, Michael Dell is a hero of mine. I love GeoHot, old friend. I'll just be fully transparent with you guys. My two hesitations are that, first, I'm relatively... I phrase it as we are anti-noob because like the role of this community is to not be focused on beginner stuff and to be for like in-industry experienced people. So I'm much better at talking to people who have been paid to code. And I don't know how good of a resource I would even be to teenagers. Like I would cause them any problems I solve there. And the other is that I'm really bad at not swearing. I've tried. I'm really bad at it. And I would feel so bad cursing in front of a bunch of teenagers. If those aren't enough of a reason for you guys to say, yeah, maybe not, I'm definitely still very down. But if they are, I totally understand. I might not be the right fit. I love the fact that you guys are giving me that opportunity. It's definitely something I'm down to consider. But yeah, we'll talk more. If you guys don't have an immediate response now, that's fine too. We can chat more offline. I just don't want to... I don't want to take the space from somebody who'd be better for it, and I don't want to, like, disappoint, I guess is the best word, by not being anywhere near as useful of a talk as those others would have been. Okay. You'd love to do it no matter what. You're convincing me. You have my email from the donation. Email me later. We'll get that figured out in the next couple weeks. I'm in utter chaos for a little bit, but I'll try my best to get back to you guys ASAP. I'm definitely down to figure that out. You've had worse AMAs. I'm fine cursing. Okay. I have been considering doing an AMA stream just to clip farm. So I think it'd be really fun to like get a bunch of like questions that I could answer in under 2 minutes and turn into shorts. Awesome. Thank you guys again, Hack Club. Seriously appreciate y'all a ton. You're doing everything here right, and I'm happy to get the opportunity to shout about y'all. Hopefully the video, when it comes out, will get you a nice surge in donations. Get these in roughly the right order. Gonna label this as mid-pry. This I need to go play with before I can do a video on it. Okay. We got 4 vids. That keeps us like alive-ish. I'll probably record offline, or if possible, go live. Let me check my calendar on my phone really quick and see how screwed I am the next few days. Okay. Actually can probably do tomorrow or Monday, depending on if any news happens. I won't formally plan just yet, but depending on what I get up to off stream, like I really just want to go spend the next few hours playing with all this shit, locking in and seeing if there's anything else I have to say to make content about. We have enough videos that we're no longer in like active video behind debt. So I feel a lot better. Cool. I think we're going to wrap up here. Thank you all for hanging out on a Saturday. Oh shit, happy that you're enjoying Zen so much, G Martin. Appreciate that. We got Rusty here with the sub. Bimtron here. Thanks for the videos. Giving me a presentation React Native at work, and I've helped a ton. That's really cool to hear, genuinely. Thanks, Shamu, for gifting Hat Club. Thanks, Flynn, for the sub. Hujiro, here now. You have a lifelong sub now. Appreciate that a ton. Thank you so much, as always. Good to see you. Hope all's well. Grunzen here with the 7 months of support. I think that's everyone. Heading out. Thank you, Hat Club, for stopping by. We'll definitely chat. Yeah, sorry that I was so behind. Also, yes, I have the new phone. I haven't had any chance to play this just yet. I don't have too much to say about the H1B, not enough for a video, and I don't want, because if I was to do a video on it, it would become political immediately. Genuinely don't really want it to be if I don't have to make political content. Study time could be fun. I'm leaning study. Okay, actually, I want to go watch that, so I'm going to watch that after stream, but we'll show you guys a study time. As long as she's, like, awake. Okay, she is. You guys are going to hang out with study time. She's a good friend of the channel. Very fun. Programmer, but I'd say programmer in quotes at this point. Nope. Raid, study, TME. Have fun with study. See you guys possibly Monday or possibly the next 2 days, otherwise on Wednesday. Goodbye, nerds. Goodbye to YouTube as well.